All right, good evening, everybody. This is the Community Consolidated School District 46 Board of Education meeting for Wednesday, September 1st, 2021 at 6:30 p.m. We are currently at Frederick School on Frederick Road. First order of business, I need a call to order and a roll call, please.
Weedman,
Here?
Mack,
Here.
Braden,
Here.
Anderson,
Here.
LaCroix,
Here.
Miller,
Here.
and Nash.
Here.
Okay, that gives us a quorum. Next, if we could please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. Thank you very much. Next, I need a motion to approve tonight's agenda, please.
So moved. Second.
Miller,
Aye.
Anderson,
Aye.
Mack,
Aye.
Weedman,
Aye?
Braden,
Aye.
LaCroix,
Aye.
and Nash.
Aye.
Okay, next is public comments. Do we have anybody signed up? Nobody signed up. Okay, thank you. Moving right along. First is presentations. So presentation by Arbor Food Management. If you could, there's a button on the mic that'll turn green if you push it. Thank you.
Good evening. I'm Kathy Tentler. I'm the Vice President of Operations with Arbor. And this is Jennifer Malchow. She is our corporate dietitian as well as a district manager who oversees Grays Lake amongst other districts. So today we were asked to put together a presentation. We were asked to do it a couple months ago, so obviously some things have changed since then as far as the type of service that we're providing. So some of this presentation doesn't really pertain to what we're doing now as far as what we're offering with a la carte. So I just wanted to mention that. But Jennifer's going to talk about nutrition update. We're going to talk a little bit about CDC guidelines, sustainability, and some surveys that we'd like to get out to the kids once we get the food service going in the next couple weeks. We'd like to send something out. So Jennifer's going to take over.
Okay, I just wanted to start out and say that, we're glad to be here. Arbor Management is pleased to be the food service provider for District 46. Way back when, in between 88 and 2006, we had an 18-year run, and we have been here now since 2017. We just wanted to thank you for the opportunity and the partnership. And of course, we strive to do our best every day. And agenda, nutrition update, CDC guidance, sustainability, and surveys. So first, nutrition. Things changed a little bit since this slide, but it still pertains. So for this school year, it's now the Seamless Summer program, which includes the National School Lunch Program guidelines, which is offer versus serve, is what we're doing, except for breakfast. It's a served meal right now being sent home. So just a quick meal flexibility update. All the milk must be, all the flavored milk must be non-fat. Previously, it was able to be 1%, so now that's being changed. And it could change again, so things keep going back and forth. All grains need to be whole grain rich. In last year's program, it didn't need to be whole grain rich. Also, we're supposed to be doing Tier 2 sodium guidelines, but there's a waiver for that. That was kind of moved up before the Tier 1 was supposed to be what we were doing, but they moved it up really quickly this year to Tier 2 or Target 2. But manufacturers are really not there yet. Because of the switch was done so quickly, they don't have the recipes formulated to be lower sodium. And if they do change their recipes to lower sodium, they're probably going to add other things, like maybe sugar, so that the food is actually palatable for students. Also, so the waiver has come out this past week, I think it was, and we can waive the sodium target, and we're okay, no questions asked from the state. But the grains and the milk, that can be waived, but we have to prove that we can't do it. For example, if our milk company can't get us skimmed chocolate anymore, they can only do 1% chocolate, then we would have to do a waiver. Also, the School Nutrition Association has recommended that we don't go to stricter sodium guidelines. They're the experts, so I tend to follow what they say. Smart snacks. We did not start the school year off on smart snacks yet, but hopefully this is something we could do in the future. Smart snacks are foods that we could sell a la carte in the school, and they have to meet specific guidelines. So I have some guidelines listed up here so that you could see. So if anything, or if we sell anything, we have this smart snack calculator. We go online, put all the ingredient nutritionals in the calculator, and it will tell us if the food is compliant or not. So anything that we sell has to go through that calculator and has to be compliant. All the items that we do buy are specifically formulated for smart snacks. For example, if you see, like, if your kid says, oh, I got ice cream at school, or I got a cookie. Well, the ice cream's lower fat, lower sodium. It has to meet specific calories. It has to be 200 calories or less. So it's a smaller portion. So it's not something that they're gonna buy at the grocery store because it's specifically made for schools. The cookies are reduced fat, they're whole grain. I think it'll satisfy them that they got ice cream or a cookie or chips, but it tastes a little bit different. It's healthier, right? Let's be honest. So this is an example of something that we would sell from Hershey's ice cream. It's a salted caramel brownie crunch. So it sounds fun and exciting, but it's definitely within the guidelines for smart snacks. Also, so moving on to CDC guidance. So this school year, we're not able to do our normal fruit and veggie bars like we have been because we don't want kids to just go and grab fruits and veggies like they have done in the past. We are bagging everything up so that it is safe for them to grab a bag of fruit or veggies, or it's cupped up, or we would hand it to them and put it directly on their tray. So there's different options that we're doing. But we're also making sure that the kids are coming through the line and we're doing hot food. We don't have as many choices as we would like right now. For example, we're not making fresh-made pizzas at the middle school right now, but they are getting pizza. So it's scaled back just a little bit, but once we kind of get more in the groove of things, we can hopefully do better things. Plus, with everything being free for the students for breakfast and lunch, our numbers are increasing. So it's a little bit more to prep than what we're used to. Also, breakfast is going home at the end of the day, and that's being pre-bagged. There is a temporary waiver for that from the state, and I know that's being applied for. But the state is definitely, the goal is to have breakfast at the beginning of the day because they want to ensure that the kids are eating breakfast before school. Because if we're sending it home at the end of the day, then we can't ensure that they're eating it before school. And obviously we want them to do that so their bellies are full during the school day, better test scores, better attendance, all that fun stuff. But I know the state wants breakfast at the beginning of the day, and I know we're working to find a way to do that, to make that happen. Moving on to sustainability. So there's different components to sustainability, and one of them is locally sourced products. So that would be, getting produce locally. I know, like, one of our things, let's say, for example, like tortillas. That's from a company in Chicago. So that's something that we have that's locally sourced. But I know right now things are being a little bit more challenging with manufacturers because they are not shipping out product like we would like. I'm sure if anybody has been to the grocery store recently, there's some things just not on shelves. So we're running into the same issues. And it's coming from the manufacturer. But we are working our best to make sure that we're getting everything that we need. For example, trays, styrofoam trays. I don't know, the companies are not going to be making styrofoam trays anymore, so now we have to source it from somewhere else. So we're working very hard behind the scenes to make sure everything goes smoothly. Another thing to sustainability is waste, and that would be the most impactful thing that we could do, is making sure that we're not wasting food. So actually 30 to 40% of food produced is wasted. And actually 1,200 calories a day go to waste for like a typical person. So we need to make sure that the food that we're producing is the right amount for each of the schools. I don't know if, see, in the back of the house in the kitchen, there's probably a lot more waste than you think. So if we're not getting the right numbers for orders, then that food goes in the garbage. Also with offer versus serve, we want to make sure that kids get a choice of what they want, because if they have to take it, it's going to go in the garbage. Some other things that we can look at is green paper options and biodegradable trays, but those things always come with a cost, right? More expensive. And I know with having to bag fruits and vegetables, that creates more plastic, and I know that's not our goal, but at this point in time, that's just all we can do. There are other things that we could do as far as with waste. There's wastedfoodaction.org. There's a school like toolkit. You can go online and see what schools can do as far as separating garbage, or, putting milk in a pail and throwing the containers out in the garbage. Someone has to dump the milk out, or making sure that certain items are recycled when they're being thrown away in the lunchroom. And if anybody wants any more information on that, I would be happy to provide that. Also for student surveys, in like October, November, we plan to organize a student menu feedback group. do some taste testing. We planned to do this at the end of the school year last year, but the menu was very limited because of the constraints that we had. However, the surveys will be something that we can send out to the students, possibly November. We could do a paper survey to K4 or a Google survey to the grades 5-8. I think that once we, get through the menu cycle a few times, and then we could see what we could do about getting kids to taste new things. I think that would be a good opportunity around that time. So does anybody have any questions?
I actually have a couple, Mr. Wheatman. Thank you for the presentation. I know you can't see my lips moving.
Oh, yeah.
A few questions I had. When you were covering the Smart Snack Calculator,
Yes.
I just didn't catch who's responsible for the governance of that tool, ensuring that the
Food
outputs
service.
are correct.
Food service is in charge of that. We need to keep that information on file, and when we get audited by the state, that's something that they look at.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
And then you referenced hot lunch and just some restrictions around that. And I think pizza was maybe your example in terms of limitations with hot lunch. I just was curious, are the hot lunches temperature controlled at all?
Yes.
They are?
We have hot or heated cabinets that the lunches are held in, and we have steam tables that we put the food in during service. So it's kept hot in transportation and when holding at the school.
Okay. Two more. When you referenced the challenges with the state and wanting to ensure that breakfast is served in the AM, you indicated that you guys are exploring options. I just wanted to know if you could speak a little bit more to that as to what you've been considering as it pertains to delivering breakfast in the AM. Like, are you exploring having route runners do home delivery? What are some of the things you guys are looking at?
Okay, so for breakfast, what we're exploring is having a bagged breakfast, so when the kids walk in school, they can grab that breakfast. Either it's going to go to the cafeteria in a specific place where they're sitting, or to the classroom. We haven't discussed all of the details on that, but it's in the early stages. We have to consider close contact and, the distance that we need to keep between the students.
But preliminary thoughts is it's something that would be disseminated on-prem.
Yeah. Jen, can I chime in for a moment?
Sure.
Okay, because this is a plan that we have to make together, obviously. And this is one of those examples of competing interests. So we have information, I believe it's come from the USDA, that we are requested and ultimately will be required to serve breakfast on site rather than sending home the food as we're currently doing. We've applied for and have been granted a waiver through the end of December. So we have all the way through the end of December to make a change in our plans. Why is this a competing interest? Well, because as Jen was talking about, the thinking is if kids come on site and eat their food on site, we can know that they've eaten their food, right? So that's one interest. Another interest, of course, is to meet our mitigation strategies. And in the past, prior to COVID and prior to breakfast being free to everyone, for the most part, in most schools, students would come in, grab their breakfast, sit down quickly in the cafeteria, eat their breakfast, go back to their, go to their classroom. Because breakfast and lunch are free to everyone now, we wouldn't be able to do that, right? We can't seat all of our kids in the cafeteria, which means we believe we're going to have to put them into our classrooms. That's problematic because children have to take off their masks. We are not sat 6 feet apart in our classrooms. We are sat 3 to 4 feet apart in our classrooms. And so without some pretty specific engineering and planning, children will be unmasked and sitting next to each other or 3 feet apart during breakfast. This is something we deeply want to avoid. In addition, as you know, we've just started our shield testing. Well, shield testing requires that a person not go through that saliva-based test within an hour after eating or drinking something. So we have very carefully orchestrated our shield tests so that the first kids who go through it know, okay, I got to finish my breakfast at home by this time because I have shield testing first thing in the morning. And we finished that schedule prior to knowing that this change was coming. So we can ultimately change our shield testing schedule and bump it forward, but we've just gotten started. We don't really want to do that. I'm going to be open with you and tell you it's my hope that we're actually going to be able to vaccinate kids prior to even having to make this change and have kids eating on site. So that's a long explanation. It doesn't tell you exactly what we're going to do, but you should expect that we probably won't be doing on-site breakfast until we absolutely have to at the start of next year, because we have to kind of meet both of those competing concerns.
Thanks for that additional insight, Dr. Glickman.
Absolutely.
And my last question was around the sustainability efforts that was talked about, and specifically around waste. I was curious if we had specific numbers as it pertains to D46 waste numbers.
No, we do not have specific numbers on that. We do our best to make sure that we're not overproducing so that the food doesn't go in the garbage. We try to do it close enough so that, yeah, we're not overproducing, but we have enough extra in case students change their minds. Because that happens a lot, where they see the lunch and they're like, oh, yeah, I want that now. So we need to make sure that we have extra for that.
And if you don't, I can speak to that a little bit as well. As far as the offer versus serve program, what that means is out of the 5 items that we offer at lunch, the grain, the dairy, the fruit, vegetable, and the meat or meat alternative, they must choose at least 3. One has to be a fruit or a vegetable. So we can't force them to take any particular item when they come through. We just encourage them. But if they don't have a fruit or a vegetable, they have to make a choice, and they have to take 2 other items minimally. We actually try and encourage them to take some choices so that they're getting a full belly. Otherwise, sometimes they just have a milk, some tomatoes, and maybe a piece of pizza. So we try and encourage without forcing it, because they will just throw it away. They'll say, I don't want it, I'm just going to throw it away. So we just make sure that they have at least a fruit or a vegetable and 2 other items, and all we can do is encourage that they take other items, but if not, they'll just end up throwing it away.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I think it would be helpful if we had some type of metrics to inform, what and where we're wasting, and maybe that could help to inform production of XYZ number, to forecast for how many vegetables or fruits or whatever we need to keep on hand at any given time to mitigate that as much as possible. So.
Right,
Okay.
and we can work on that. And also, we do get pre-orders in the morning, so we wait on each school secretary to call us with orders so that we have a better idea of exactly what we need to send there. And then, like Jennifer said, we'll always do a buffer, especially this time of year, because we don't ever want to run out of food. I'd rather have 10, 12 extras than having a student have to take a cereal as a meal or whatever. So today we ran short somewhere. We were running around. We got it back to them. We got it from another school. So that's never a good feeling. So we do the best we can. We get the numbers and we send a buffer. And then as far as the fruit and veggies, we never know what they're going to take. We know what the favorites are. So tomatoes, not so much. Broccoli with ranch is somewhat of a favorite, so we kind of work on history and what each school district or each school likes.
Good deal. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I just had a couple of questions for you. Early in the presentation, you mentioned that somebody didn't recommend going to the sodium guidelines. Who was it that didn't recommend it, and did they say a reason why?
Yeah, the School Nutrition Association is the one that made those recommendations. And part of the reason is for student acceptance. We want to make sure that the food is palatable and the kids want to eat it. Because if we are giving out food and they don't like it and they're throwing it in the garbage, that's really not helping anybody because the food's not in their belly. If their food's not in their belly, they're not getting any nutrition.
Okay. And then, this is, while it's relevant to the district, how's your staffing levels compared to the beginning of the school year? Have you gotten any better or back to where you would like to be?
Well, right now, when we started, we only had 6 employees out of the 19. That's just because during the period of time, over the last 17 months, we haven't had to have all the staff. So people have either moved on or not comfortable to come back to work in this environment, or have kids at home or elderly families. So it was a little challenging at the beginning of the year. We're still working through it. Myself, Jennifer, we have our VP of Sales, our VP Administration. We've all been working every day for the last 2 weeks to make sure that we're providing the service that the district needs while we're hiring. So I think we're up to, as of Friday, I think it was 11 employees. So we're getting there. Yeah, and we do have five temporary workers, meaning I had to reach out to a temp agency to get bodies in. So we're paying double to have them, but until we get everybody hired, that's what we need to do right now. So we're getting there. We're getting more people in the door because we increased the rates, but it's just a matter of whether they go through the fingerprints and actually show up for the first day and stick around.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Anybody else have questions?
I do, thank you. You know, I'm struck that the smart nutrition guidelines seem to be restricting the bad stuff without prescribing any limits or any levels of, you know, what I would consider to be nutrition. Looking at the nutrition label on that Brownie Lovers Salted Caramel Brownie Crunch Bar, it appears as though there's actually no nutritive value in that at all. So I'm struck by the fact that in order to make it fit these guidelines, we're making these smaller, you know, snacks that while they might fit these guidelines, they don't really contain any nutritive value. Is that the case, that these guidelines don't prescribe an amount of, say, protein? They just restrict some things that we consider to be the bad elements?
They do restrict things, but they are supposed to have some type of nutritional value to it, like calcium. So, yeah, I mean, it doesn't always have to be ice cream. There's other things that can be sold, like water, fruits and veggies, cheese sticks. But I just wanted to show you an example of something that is specifically formulated to be sold for schools. So it might look really bad, but it's been scaled down for smart snacks. And those guidelines are, you know, from the USDA. It's not something that we make up. So it's part of the federal program.
And I think anyone who's a parent in here understands the battle of, you know, it would be great if we just put out a spread of Brussels sprouts and broccoli in front of these kids and they would eat it. Yeah. I understand that it's doing no one any good if you put Brussels sprouts out there and 99% of it ends up in the garbage, but there's got to be something more substantial than what I know I see my kid come home with sometimes for the, you know, the snack. I just don't know what that is, and it's, you know, an age-old question, I'm sure, in the, you know, educational food service industry, how to get something in front of them that really provides them with the nutrition that their learning, growing bodies need, that they'll actually eat. Hot food seems to be better than the prepackaged stuff, and I know that's part of our long-range facilities plan, is to see if we can, you know, bolster our facilities at more of our schools to be able to accommodate a hot lunch option. So I just wanted to end by saying thank you for your flexibility and your determination to help the district work through. I know it's been a challenging time with the pandemic and the labor shortage, and thank you for your partnership.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anybody else have questions? Okay.
So I just wanted to kind of piggyback on what Jason was asking about the nutritional value. So I understand that with the smart snacks and things like that, that you want to provide options that the kids will actually select versus things that they might pass regularly. But when it comes to the breakfasts that are being sent home, and that's not they're not selecting anything at that point. Is there a way to increase the nutritional value of those versus like donuts and Pop-Tarts and things like that that are being sent home to something that will be more substantial? Because those sugars are going to be out of their systems very quickly, and they're going to crash mid-morning. So is there a different percentage for breakfast in terms of nutrition versus lunches and things that are being sent home versus made optional?
All the items that we provide for breakfast meet the guidelines for the USDA. Obviously, when you're sending food home, we want it to be a little bit more shelf stable. So it kind of limits some of our options on what we can send. So it's going to be something that's prepackaged and not homemade, I guess. The best options obviously are going to be homemade hot, eggs and like a good protein, but that's not something that we could do easily sending it home when they're going on the bus.
The only other thing I can say with that is we can try as much as we can to add a little more protein in yogurts and cheese sticks and that. We do have a limitation with refrigeration space at each school. So each school we're storing and now bagging up to 350 breakfasts a day. Some schools, we're all kind of helping out. It's a lot of work getting all these bags and we're getting them off before that. But there's a very limited amount of refrigeration in the schools. So when we're trying to pack all that and get it back in the coolers until it's time to go to keep it cold, once we get that milk in there, we have to keep it at a certain temp. And then we also have refrigerated items for lunch that day that we're trying to figure out where to put. So that's kind of been our challenge right now, that we really have to find a lot of shelf-stable items, which happen to be the packaged type items. Once the kids are back in school, we have a lot more flexibility because not back in school, but once they're able to come back through the lines, we'd have a little more flexibility to be able to offer some hot items and some things that we can have heat and serve at the schools. But we can certainly look at the menu a little closer and see if there's some days where we can offset as many of those packaged type items. But that is the challenge right now, and we are having difficulty right now with the manufacturers even getting some of those items. A lot of the trucks pull up and you're missing 10 items that you ordered, and it's kind of, it's nationwide. It's not just us or our vendor, it's the manufacturers that are short-staffed and can't keep up with production. Some are shutting down completely their line of products because they just can't make them, so we have to find others. And so that's really been our challenge right now, just trying to make sure we get product to feed. But we will do our best and look at the menu.
Thank you, I appreciate that. And then if there's any other way to try to get with the prepackaged items, something that does have, a little more protein and a little less sugar. I know the sugar, it's more the sodium, it sounds like, than the sugars that are of concern right now. But anything you guys can do is always appreciated. Thank you.
All right, we will definitely look into it more.
Yeah. Thank you.
Okay, seeing no other questions, thank you for your
All right.
presentation and your time tonight.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And I'll stick around because I know there's a discussion item coming up, so I'll be here in case there's any questions during that time.
Okay. Next is a presentation by Train Indoor Quality, presentation by Train. It was the Indoor Quality Assessment Update. Needed a comma there.
Was that?
I just needed a comma there.
Oh. Sorry about that. So, good evening. My name is Pat Henneberry, Train Chicago. Thanks for the intro. This is my teammate, where'd you go? Gabby Krause and Joe Ruiz, who is our account engineer and largely the author of the Indoor Air Quality Assessments. I know you guys have not seen them yet, but tonight this is largely to give you kind of an update on where we're at in the process, okay? You guys should probably sit down. I think I can. So recently we've partnered with the district to assess the district's ventilation controls, mechanical systems to determine, I guess, if there's any enhancements that should be done and to provide a current state as it pertains to indoor air quality needs and capabilities. This tonight will be an update on where we're currently at with the 7 schools that we've done an assessment Again, it might be difficult at times to, I guess, understand the magnitude and the level of, I guess, detail that goes into these reports, but we'll do our best tonight just to get you as far as we can. And then I think once you actually do get your hands on the reports, then you'll get a full digestion of exactly what it took to come up with a lot of the back-end slides here. So our reports outline the impact of implementing indoor air dilution and outside air strategies. Our approach follows the science and recommendations as set forth by the CDC and ASHRAE. So if you're not familiar with ASHRAE, it's basically the governing body for the HVAC industry. And then, of course, CDC, I think everybody at this point should be fairly well aware of what CDC is and what the CDC does. Our reports will also outline the immediate and future benefits for, I guess, what you can do today for indoor air quality purposes, as well as what you can do tomorrow. So the low-hanging fruit today, and then, of course, the big rocks that you might want to tackle tomorrow. And that'll be largely more at the end of this presentation, where you'll see the actual numbers coming in. So I'm sorry. We just went through this. Present condition of indoor air quality systems and capabilities, Grays Lake School District 46. This slide's just meant to update you on I guess where we're at. So currently, your indoor air quality systems are old but safe and functioning. I want to highlight that. You have mechanical cooling, you have building controls. Well, of course, there's enhancements to those systems in order to do more, right? The current building automation systems across the district are, in fact, obsolete. Most systems are, in fact, 15 years or older, mixed with pneumatic control operation, which, if you're not familiar with pneumatics, it's a very antiquated way of doing things. It's probably a 30 to 50-year-old technology. So what this means to the district is that it causes the district to be unable to perform sophisticated indoor air quality building automation systems strategies. We get into that in detail in the reports. We can get into it a little bit later if you'd like. In addition to that, various equipment across the district is beyond its ASHRAE life expectancy and is in need of replacement. So the reports also outline, I guess, the budgetary costs to replace certain pieces of equipment that have been identified as being outside of that range or limited in their ability to, I guess, perform the sophisticated indoor air quality equipment strategies. Across the district, because of the systems that are in place, you have, I guess, I don't want to say it's completely inefficient, but it's largely an inefficient operation between the equipment, the controls, and the exhaust system. There's too much manual operation. Thank God you have a team that Adam's built. He's done a fantastic job with that. I know he's running around like a maniac. That impacts the equipment's life expectancy over time because you're stressing the equipment. You're running it harder just to get it to perform, to get it to do what you need it to do. And then, of course, you have, a limited ability to exhaust properly per the IAQ standards as set forth by ASHRAE and CDC, the ASHRAE guidelines and the new CDC guidelines. So when I say the new ASHRAE guidelines, the new CDC guidelines, what I'm really speaking in regards to is last year on April 14th, right as we were getting, I guess as we were entering the pandemic, there was a revision made to the approach in which you should operate buildings so that you could open them, so that you could make them safe. And we don't see this revision really going anywhere. We can have Joe speak to that maybe a little bit later. I think that when you see the reports, you'll be able to read more in depth about what ASHRAE and what the CDC guidelines are meant to do. But really, it's built around. There's 4 pillars, I guess, for indoor air quality. I'll get into that in a slide coming up. But this is just a little bit of a recap. Our reports will outline the current and future benefits for upgrade and implementation and how to do it. We'll get into the obsolescence component. We'll get into what you can do today for air quality benefits and strategies that will last into the future, and of course what you can do tomorrow. The energy impact, there's a huge amount of energy impact with, I guess, an aged system. And by upgrading, you can look to save quite a bit of money, save equipment over time, because obviously with older equipment and limited control over the equipment, there's limited savings in how you can operate that piece of equipment. And then, of course, our reports will also outline the repair and replacement needs in the district. The reports will outline, I guess, how to properly dilute, exhaust, contain, and clean. Those are the 4 pillars. You'll see those referenced on the next slide. One thing that you will get, and I do want to mention this, I'm sorry. Here we go. Yeah. One thing that we will provide the district once we're complete and the reports have been reviewed by all the appropriate parties. Every school will receive an air system quality recognition plaque. You can put that on. I mean, we can order as many as you need to put on certain doors, but it's just to show that you've gone through this process and that you've taken the initiative and the steps to ensure proper indoor air quality measures within the district. So these are the 4 pillars as set forth by ASHRAE. In order to achieve proper indoor air quality, you have to dilute, you have to exhaust, you have to contain, and you have to clean. Dilution means that you're bringing in plenty of fresh air. And of course, exhaust means that you're flushing the stale air from the buildings. Okay, so any amount of air that you bring in, you also have to exhaust. Containment means that, okay, so if you bring fresh air into the building, well, there's an impact to that, right? You're bringing in humidity into the building. So you have to be able to, in order to maintain proper humidity levels, you have to do a level of CO2 sensing, humidity sensing, so that you're not impacting the learning environment or the teaching environment, so on and so forth. In addition to that, it allows you to really stay up on whether or not you're bringing in any harmful microbiologicals, airborne pathogens, and so on and so forth. And then clean is really filtration. That allows you to eliminate, I guess, quickly within the unit or downstream in the breathing zone, any microorganisms, mold, bacteria, viruses, so on and so forth. You're already doing that, but the reports outline a way to upfit your equipment to a more effective filter. We'll just call it a larger filter that you probably are not using at this time. Now, all of our reports will be reviewed. They are currently under review by your district partner, your district architect, Wold. In the coming weeks, we will be meeting with them along with the facilities team to get Wold's feedback and to discuss things in further detail on where we're at. So I want to let you guys know that. So now we're getting into the actual school by school top recommendations, and I tried to summarize this as best as I could. Now, these are probably around 40 some odd page reports for each and every school, and they come embedded with videos, so you can actually see what we're talking about, pictures of equipment, pictures of things that we're trying to show you. Okay, this piece of equipment, we're not just saying is old, we're showing you is old because it doesn't do this or it doesn't do that. So Park Campus, I know it's one of your newer buildings, but it's still met with obsolescence. I'll go through the big rocks because I don't know if you guys want me to go line by line. That could take some time. And again, I think if you have the reports in your hand, this will make much more sense. But I feel that maybe we can highlight the big rocks, which will largely be the building automation systems in the schools because they are in fact obsolete. And you could do so much more by eliminating or upgrading to a modern system. In addition to that, there's a huge amount of energy savings potential. So the big rocks, like I said, in every school are going to be the building automation systems. We have an estimated budget broken out per school. This is more or less meant to be a menu or a shopping list. This isn't, I don't want you to think that you got to do all this today, but this is a plan to help you plan for the future and plan to figure out what's best for you, right? What can the district do today? What does the district want to do tomorrow? The quickest thing, and I know Adam's already on it because he was up on this last year already, opening up damper positions and upgrading filters, but we outlined, so every piece of equipment we're outlining what filter size you can move to, because when I say MERV 13, that doesn't mean you can put a MERV 13 filter in every single piece of equipment. For example, older unit vents, you can't do that because you're going to restrict the unit. You'll cause mechanical issues downstream, so you have to have the right filter size in a piece of equipment like that. So what we've done in the reports is we're outlining, I guess, the part number or the filter number that is necessary or recommended for that style of equipment. So that'll all be in the report. The range there is just to give you an idea of what the highest MERV filter costs and what maybe some of the smaller filters like a MERV 6, 7, or 8 might cost you, which I'm sure Adam's already aware of. But in any case, it goes piece by piece, equipment piece by equipment piece. Again, Prairie View, you see that the big rock is building automation system. There's in every single one of these assessments, you're going to see that there's smaller recommendations mixed in with larger recommendations. And excuse me, I know that it's probably too much to get into tonight, but in every single assessment, you will find different air cleaning technologies. Okay. And that could be anything from UVC lighting to bipolar ionization to Synexis, which is dry hydrogen peroxide. Basically, it's an added filtration strategy to clean air and clean surfaces. All the information about the product is listed in the reports. It's probably too much to get into tonight because it is very, I don't want to say complicated product, but I guess in essence it is, right? It's fairly detailed and there's a lot to it, but if there's questions about it, please feel free to ask. Frederick, again, Big Rock is going to be a building automation system and what it costs to upgrade to a more modern system. Oops, sorry. Meadowview, smaller school, still a lot of equipment in these schools. Woodview, smaller school, but still a lot of equipment. Avon, Avon's an interesting one. It's a mix of very, very old and very, very new. You have the new section, you have the old section. I think there's an air handling unit in the basement that probably belongs in some sort of a museum, which I think is, I don't know what's in the corner, Adam. Back in the old well. The old well. That, of all things, should be in a museum. Yes. It's no longer in use, but it's still working in the industry. You look at it and you're like, wow, that's pretty cool that it's still there. Additional recommendations at Avon. There's some other things that we were already kind of working on. For example, the old boiler system. So that's included in there. Not necessarily as it relates to indoor air quality, but just to show you that is a system that does need some attention. So we included that as a budgetary. Now, I do want to mention this. So every single cost that you see in here, every single budget number that you see it is a turnkey number. So that's including engineering, mechanical, electrical, project management, warranties, you name it. Everything is wrapped up into that number, and these are forecasted out at least for the next 3 to 5 year term. Okay? Grays Lake Middle School, we saved the best for last. This one comes with, there's quite a bit here. Not a bad school, but there's some older units on the roof that require some attention. And it's a mix of some DDC controls, and when I say DDC, that's an older automation system, and a mix of pneumatic controls, which is the old system. A recap here, just to kind of give you an order of magnitude on the combined estimated budget between all 7 schools. And next steps. So next steps will be to, over the next month, do a detailed report review with the facilities team and to figure out, I guess, or to start stack ranking the projects, figure out what's most important, what we can do today. The reports do a good job of that. They'll tell you exactly what you can do today, the low-hanging fruit, the no-cost items. Some adjustments you can do to damper positions, which I know Adams is doing. In addition to that, over the next month, we're going to do a thorough scope review, as I mentioned before, with WOLD, and then we'll start prioritization of the projects in partnership with the district. Okay? And that is our update. I'm sure we'll probably be back to talk more about it once you guys do get your hands on the reports. I'm sorry that you haven't had a chance to see them yet. They are very involved. They do take a lot of time, but whatever I can do to, I guess, recap or highlight certain items, I'll do just to make the reading a little bit easier. Okay, but like I said, there are some videos, so there are actually quite a few videos, so you can, at least those will take the least amount of time. Any questions?
I actually do. First off, you presented a very staggering number of dollars to actually do a lot of this. For those who didn't get a chance to see it online, or 7.1 to 8.4 million dollars over the next couple of years if we were to do all these projects. But you mentioned something about saving of energy costs. So what would the time frame be for recouping the costs through energy savings to do these projects? You know, we're gonna have to do one or two things if we did them all, is a referendum, take out a big loan, or find other ways to creatively finance it. What is the time frame of the energy savings for each building or the overall project? And how long it would be to recoup that money through the energy savings?
Good question. And we can build you that number. Now, generally speaking, don't hold me to it. So I do want to highlight with this. So every single school would qualify for a ComEd incentive. Okay, so ComEd incentivizes for building automation systems that are outside of 15 years old. Okay, so you will minimally, and we're going to do our best, because some of these systems are a hybrid of, you know, DDC and pneumatic. But if we can get you the pneumatic incentive, that can be built around 35 cents per square foot. But mostly you should probably be looking at 10 to 15 cents per square foot. Eddie, that's just the incentive component. Now, from an energy savings standpoint, industry standard, just by upgrading to a modern system, improving scheduling, equipment, the way that you're operating the equipment, so on and so forth, you could probably reasonably see roughly 10 to 15% year-over-year energy savings. And that can be realized right away.
Okay.
So as far as a simple payback, I can't give you that today, but I can build that number for Adam, and I will do that.
I think that would be something that we would be interested in seeing, at least, getting an idea.
Yep.
Christine?
Is there a way to, well, I have two questions. The first one is actually for Adam. Adam, can you tell us a little bit about why you prioritized indoor air quality over other repairs that I'm sure are needed on our buildings. And that leads to my question for you.
So what I was looking at, sorry about that, let me back this up a little bit. So what I was looking at doing is, as I've gone through the buildings myself, we have a lot of equipment throughout the district. This assessment that we're going over here is not everything that you see up here. It is the complete workings of every single system we have. How every damper operates, if it operates. It goes into recommissioning of the equipment. We have nothing on record that shows anything of how our buildings are actually working and running. This goes into our long-range plan, where with our long-range plan, we are not given that from the mechanical standpoint. So we brought in an outside mechanical contractor to be able to come in with one of our own people inside, walked the complete buildings with them. They went to every single piece of equipment and actuated every damper, fully blasted every unit, brought it down to see how everything operates, where our faults are, what's good, what's not. So really, at the end of the day, what it was to get us that idea of where we stand on a perspective from dollar side to prioritizing what we need to get done throughout the district on our mechanical.
Adam, if I may, I think that the title maybe, I don't want to say misleading, because it is where we're going, right? It's where we want to, I guess, guide the district, because from a systems approach, that's the only way to really, perform proper indoor air quality measures. But I think the report maybe hides the fact that when it says indoor air quality assessment, I think you just go straight to indoor air quality, right? But what we did is a comprehensive review of the mechanical systems as well. Mm-hmm. And that was what we initially discussed. So it's all, in addition to it being an assessment to look at indoor air quality measures that you can implement today, tomorrow, but it's also a complete review of your mechanical systems.
Sure. And that makes a lot of sense to me, just to see where we are. And I guess where I thought you might head, and maybe you can correct me if or please do correct me if I'm wrong, is if we do this assessment and we have a good understanding of what needs to be fixed, that eventually improves, or I think it does improve occupant health, correct? There's something called sick building syndrome. And so thus my second question is, can we expect any kind of, it's not just cost reductions, but can we expect a lower substitution rate or a lower sick rate for our teachers? Which of course is the least important factor. We want them to be healthy. And then are we also protecting the health of children when we invest in, because that is a substantial amount of money, but it seems like
To answer that, yes. Now, I don't want to say that you do all this and no kids are going to be sick. I can't control this, the kids coming in and the kids going out. But from a systems approach, this is what our model is built around, what CDC and ASHRAE are telling the industry to do in order to improve the air quality in the building. Now, there's also a lot of studies that tie cognitive learning to better indoor air. And we can share articles if you'd like. We can bring those to Adam, who can cascade to the district, but there's a lot that goes into that as well, because more fresh air typically impacts cognitive learning. There is a relationship between the two.
And then speaking of learning, is there any opportunity where I think are going to be talking about braiding and blending investments? So is there any opportunity for instruction with the data that we're gaining from the
As far
assessments?
as incorporating it into curriculum, like?
I'm not the curriculum person, so I don't want to step on anybody's toes, but I'm just wondering if it's a possibility.
So to answer your question, yes, we've done that at several school districts around the country. We've partnered even with community colleges to build technical programs, if you will. And I don't know what that picture looks like yet, because again, I'm not speaking to the curriculum either, but absolutely, we've done it in the past. I know that we have the resources to assist with that, and we have the ability to, you know, to do stuff like that.
If we could go back for just a moment to Christy's first question, I did want to mention that at the very top of your presentation, I heard you talk about the fact that our air quality is currently safe and it's currently healthy. And that, I feel like that's important to bring to the table, particularly during a time like this, that we don't want anyone thinking that that's not the case.
Yes.
And that our systems are old and obsolete, and we're going to start being unable to replace things, and they are inefficient. And I wanted to bring that back because I think it speaks a little bit to the question you were asking.
Yes, and I do want to highlight that Adam has initiated several things to bring in fresh air. For example, he's manually locking out certain dampers on certain older units to bring in the right amount of outside air as the guidelines are instructing him to do so. So he's taking measures like that to ensure that more air changes are done, you know, in all of your buildings.
Adam, thank you for thinking around the corner. So
Absolutely.
that we're not looking at a crisis right now, we're just able to plan. Appreciate that. Thank you for the presentation as well.
Anybody else? Okay. Thank
Okay.
you.
All right. Thank you.
Next item on
Thank you,
the,
guys.
thank you. Next item on the agenda is a presentation for special education outplacements.
Good evening, everyone. I'm going to try to be as brief as possible. I know this can be a long night. Ms. Nash and I had a nice conversation. We met on this topic after this request was made of the board and earlier this summer. So I'm going to do a brief overview, and I also know that this was actually provoked by a conversation of the accounts payable report. So I'm going to briefly touch on that so you can see how these two things connect when those accounts payable reports come to you for approval every month. So first of all, there are a range of options on the continuum of services for our students with special education needs. And two of the big highlights that you asked me to speak on were our public therapeutic options and our private therapeutic options. Our public therapeutic option that we most often use, and I have to say in my many years, we've never had to go to another therapeutic option, is CDAL. We are one of the member districts in the CDAL organization. When we have to consider a placement for a student between an in-district placement or need to look for an out-of-district placement, we're looking at the student's general needs. We match the age for a student with schools that are eligible to provide services to those students, and that eligibility comes through an accreditation process based on eligibility categories and age ranges. Oftentimes, a public therapeutic setting may not be the most appropriate to meet a need for a student because therapeutic settings in a private sector are built around certain models to meet various characteristics for students with a range of services. You may find a private therapeutic setting that really specializes in a certain therapeutic arena in autism, for example, and the list goes on. So we're really evaluating as an IEP team, and we're looking at that range of services. We're looking at the age of the student, we're looking at the types of needs for student. Oftentimes we look at the distance. We try to not have our kiddos on a bus for a very long time, which then turns into a longer time in inclement weather. Also, we're looking at what types of previous placements may have been exhausted, may have been successful, may have been unsuccessful, and what is the need for looking for an alternative placement. There are various ways in how we acquire placements as a school district, one of which I just spoke to, and that's number 3, and that is through decision-making through an IEP team. That includes the partnership of a school-based team, educational team, all the services that a student may have, but also the parent or guardian are an equal member of that decision-making process. But we also have students that acquire an outplacement through the early intervention process. We have students who come to us through birth through 3 early intervention, and we have an obligation to evaluate those students by their 3rd birthday and then provide appropriate services as necessary. And then the last way that we acquire students or we have students in outplacements is oftentimes students move to us in an existing placement. And oftentimes, if it's most appropriate, we evaluate that IEP and we continue an outplacement, or we have to look for a comparable placement if it's outside, if a student's coming from outside the area. Tuition can look a little different based on the placement. For example, CDL does a lot of upfront billing at the beginning of the fiscal year. So they take a formula that they use and calculate, and we actually have a budget meeting every spring, so we really can analyze and try to predict as best as we can how much CDL service we are going to utilize. Based on that, they pre-bill us for the year, and then they continue to make adjustments throughout the year. So you'll see costs, you'll see reimbursement costs, you also see adjustments in billing payments that we are required to provide. And that happens all throughout the year. And things that impact that are students coming and going in and out of our service delivery, need for an outplacement. Then there's also the private therapeutic sector that generally bill us monthly. And these are not always consistent, so sometimes it's really at the rate of their internal billing structure. You might get a chunk at a time, and sometimes not some for quite a season of time. We just respond when we get them, and we pay our bills on the timeline that we promise in our contract that we are obligated to provide, which is usually after the next accounts payable approval at a board meeting. All of these private therapeutic settings and public, well, not the public sector, but the private therapeutic are based on a per diem rate. So when I mentioned that the private therapeutic setting gets an accreditation, they also submit, and Wildman knows all the fancy formulas, they submit based on the services that they provide, the cost per diem that it would cost to provide those services for students. CDL is a whole billing and budgetary process that's agreed upon with their members and their board, and they reevaluate that annually. We also get a bunch of tuition reimbursement. So while you're seeing a lot of payments go out, we do capture a ton of that money back in various ways. The first way is through essentially a state reimbursement through a formula structure. And it's kind of complicated on here, so I'm gonna kind of use real simple math to make it just easy for the evening. But essentially, a public therapeutic setting, for that, we capture funds that we spend anything beyond 4 times per capita. So if we assume a round number of about 10,000 for a per capita rate, anything beyond 40,000 that we spend in tuition, we then capture in reimbursement. In a public therapeutic setting, years and years ago, there was this discrepancy in how many districts were capturing or accessing their private therapeutic settings. So the state made this formula where private therapeutic settings can offer reimbursement or the formula requires the reimbursement of anything beyond 2 times per capita. So if we spend anything beyond 20 grand by this round of math, we then capture all of that in reimbursement. Currently, our per capita rate is $13,000. We also receive fee for services through our Medicaid billing. Many of our nursing services and our clinical services, we can then tabulate and submit for service allotment by hour, and that we can capture money in that way. And then we also receive multiple grants. Our biggest one is the IDEA grant, and we get that for preschool as well as for K through 12, but we are K through 8. And I don't know if you remember, many of you may have been a part of that process where we transitioned from funds flowing through CDAL to all of our money coming to us, and now we have to find ways to get that money back. So CDAL changed their structure and charging, they realigned all of their tuition rates so they could capture that. So trying to get that money back to them from our grant, we've been allowed to earmark certain allotments of tuition, and I do that annually for our students. And then lastly, we submit for state transportation claims, and those are based on the allotments that ISB says that we're going to get. Sometimes they'll adjust those percentage rates of your whole, but for the most part, they're pretty good about getting us most of our money. We have obligations through Child Fine. It's just a kind of a confusing name sometimes, but essentially it means we have an obligation as a district to find students within our district boundaries that need services. That includes students that are in homeschool environments as well as in our parochial schools. It's kind of confusing because while we have to provide special ed students for district student residents, we also under Child Fine have to provide services for students who attend a parochial school in our boundaries. So for us, that is in St. Gilbert and Westlake. So with that comes providing evaluations, offering services if eligible, and then we also have to allocate certain allotment of our IDEA funds in services. And historically, we've been providing speech and language services to our parochial schools. There's kind of a funky formula too when you use grant funds on certified personnel. So it is often encouraged and often done to contract private therapeutics or private services for that function. It's just a nice way to provide services without that additional benefit money that when we're talking about healthcare and medical and those kind of benefits that we would have to cover in addition to the salary costs in a grant. So you will see oftentimes those private provider services that we are obligated to provide, but it's fully funded under our IDEA grant. Every year in December, there's what's called a December 1st child count, where the state counts our general student population in special education, and then they allocate a certain amount of money that we have to spend in these parochial schools. So years ago, it used to be material costs and services, and then more recently, they require that we provide services to those schools. We also have to hold a public meeting. It's called a timely, meaningful consultation, and that's in spring of every year. And that is in a public forum. We go to the library, and we've done it online, and anyone can attend, and it's just our tutorial on how to access Child Find, as well as how we anticipate spending the parochial allotment for the following year. When you read your accounts payable, I notice there's a lot of things that are earmarked outplacement, and Mr. Wildman and I are working really hard to recode that so it's a little more clear. But currently, as you read it, I talked a lot about all of that stuff because it's not just tuition-based costs that you're seeing earmarked as outplacements. You're also seeing those contractual employees that we may have contracted through private companies because we may have had a staffing discrepancy that we needed to fill with a private company. Also, our services that we provide to our parochial schools, that speech service that we provide will be marked outplacements. And lastly, our contractual services that we have. There's a bunch of other kind of services in there. For example, we have a partnership with a company who's a specialized company providing quality services in a 3-year plan. It's called Chance Light. And their goal is to help us really leverage our efficacy as a district so we can strengthen and respond to the growing needs in our district and the new needs that keep coming. And as we morph, we want to be able to respond to that. So that company, we've built a relationship to build that internal efficacy. So those are already allocated in the grant and covered by the grant, but you're going to see that in the accounts payable under outplacements right now. Again, Mr. Wildman and I are going to work on restructuring how we code that so it's a little more clear in the future. Do you all have any questions for me? I know it's a little choppy. It's been a long week already, so.
Not a question, but just a comment and a note, first of all, of thanks for Ms. Lorenzo and the work that she does in this space. The sheer volume of moving parts associated with this and her level of expertise and coverage and thoroughness with all of this was just really remarkable. And I appreciate you taking the time to walk me through it at a slower pace to make sure I was connecting the dots. So thank you for that. I also appreciate the attention to the accounts payable to help make that more clear. And I already, see some tweaks happening. So, I'm happy to see that we're going in the right direction to provide that clarity. And just no small feat what you do for our district. And I have a totally new appreciation, already appreciative of the work that you do for our children, but just the behind the scenes administrative aspects to ensure timely allocations, accurate reporting, and then your sheer passion and authentic caring for the students that you're placing in these relationships that you've built with each of the entities, which are a lot, to make sure that you can get that one-to-one placement as perfectly matched as possible for the betterment of the kids is just absolutely remarkable. So thank you for all you do.
Thank you so much. Thank you all.
Okay, thank you, Heather.
I'm sorry, I had a question, Heather.
Oh,
Real quick on the tuition reimbursement piece.
Yes.
The per capita in that formula refers to our overall student population, correct?
I'm deferring, yes. So there's a calculation on our student body, our total population?
Yeah, that 13,006 divided by 4 is around about our student population of like 3,500 or something like that. So that makes sense. But then my question is, and this is just an observation, I guess, if that's the formula for all districts, the extent to which one district may have a higher percentage of outplacement needs versus lower, it might deleteriously affect one district more than another on that reimbursement, right?
That is true. And actually, this is quite a conversation downstate, and it has been for many years, in really reevaluating that formula. In fact, they want to balance it to make it the same, because now they're seeing a shift in the other direction. And I think I'm glad you mentioned that, because I wanted you all to know that not only is it always my goal to be fiscally responsible in the decisions we make, but also to make decisions that are best for students. And if saving $1 is not providing quality services for students, I just won't ethically do that. So it's really balancing out all of that. But you hit the nail on the head that that's something that we, as a state, are continuing to look at.
Yeah, it seems to be, I don't know, patently unfair that your overall population, that's what the reimbursement formula is based on, whereas, we know the way they redid the state aid, they're trying to look at more of those individualized factors district by district. And to the extent that I think we may have more outplaced students than the average district, or at least similarly situated districts, that would seem to be in our favor if that could get changed.
That's true.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good. Thanks, Heather. Okay, board reports. Anybody have any to report? Okay. We are now with you.
No, I do. I thought you were going.
Yeah, okay.
Go ahead.
People got to raise their
I was
hand.
looking to see if anyone else needed to go.
We're going to start raising
Go ahead,
hands.
Stephen, you go first.
No, I was just going to follow up on Mrs. Lorenzo's report. I had the quarterly meeting at CDL of the governing board last Wednesday, and it was a fairly quick meeting. It was a budget presentation to all the member districts, and so Dr. Valdonen, who's the superintendent of CDL, presented the budget to the governing board, which is all the representatives, one representative from each of the member school districts. Similarly to other schools, they're experiencing a decrease in enrollment and therefore a decrease in staffing, and some budget adjustments are being made to accommodate for that. So that's all published in the budget coming up. They did report they have a new associate superintendent for educational services, Mr. Bob Taturka. He came in from Wakanda School District 118. They had a successful extended school year. And enrollment in the extended school year was up to 293 students from 269 students, which offered some excellent opportunities for Olympics, Special Olympics, and other activities for the students during the extended school year. And they are back in-person learning with very limited access to remote options if the students are in need of that. But because of what CDL does, most of the students remain at a 6 feet apart distance in all of their buildings at the moment. And so the updates from there are successful as well for the back to school for all those students. So it was a great meeting and good to see everybody at that. And the next one is coming up in December. Thank you.
Christy?
So I sent all of you an email about the UN's climate report and just wanted to highlight a few things as we're approaching the time when we're going to be thinking about board goals. So the first, and also looking at the long-range facility plan. The first one is that it comes from this handout that I sent to you. It's the regional, so first of all, this report was put out by the UN's IPCC. It's an international panel of climate scientists, and it predicts several things about our region with varying degrees of confidence. But the ones that struck me that might really impact us are first that our region's predicted to experience extreme drought and rain. It's going to get hotter, and we can do something about it. We have 100 acres of land, and if we include that in any kind of partnership or expenditure, we can actually sequester carbon and store it durably so that we can do our part to mitigate some of that drought and heat and rain. So if you have questions before our board goal setting, I would be happy to do some more reading and answer those. I just need to know what they are because it's a huge report, and just the summary is a huge report. So please let me know if you want any information when we meet in September.
Okay, Tamika?
Yes, I just wanted to remind the board to be on the lookout for the 2021 Resolution Committee report. So that should be coming out sometime, ideally early next week or sometime thereafter. I believe I saw September 5th was a target date, which would be the week of September 5th, so starting next week.
Sorry to interrupt you. What was the report?
It's the 2021 Resolutions Committee report.
Oh.
So that's where any boards that have submitted resolutions to be incorporated as part of the November delegate assembly when we're III will be reviewed and voted on at that time. So I don't believe that our board, we had any submissions, but as a board, we will want to review them collectively. So maybe an agenda item for our next meeting, perhaps to go through those and make sure that we're aligned on positioning. Thank you.
Christine? Anything? Jason, Michelle? Okay. Okay. Now we're back up to Dr. Gold.
Sure. It's 8 o'clock, so I'm going to try to make it really, really quick, but we cannot skip the fact that school has started. So we have to talk about that for a few minutes. Our students are back. Our students, the reason that we exist as a school system, are back in school, and they're doing very, very well. All of my visits to classrooms have shown very happy, engaged students. They're friendly, they're excited, they are clearly so glad to be back in school. And of course, some of them are needing a lot of reminders about what it means to be in school. We have many students who are used to being at home, and children, just like adults, are creatures of habit. So we are working on that with them. They're getting reacquainted with the school part, which is usually just a day or so after summer, but this time it's extended a bit, and our teachers are up to that task. Of course, there's a very heavy lift going on behind the scenes, things that our students should never have to be aware of or thinking about, although in some cases they are. COVID cases are few and far between. We're very glad to see that. But in some of those cases, we've had a lot of contact tracing that we've had to do. And that work has been done primarily by our health staff and our principals and Mrs. Lorenzo, as we make sure that we don't have close contacts in schools. And for the most part, we don't, because our mitigation strategies are really working, and we're able to keep our students masked and 6 feet apart. And we have to look for close contacts on the buses, and that definitely has happened, because as we know, social distancing is not possible on the bus. We're still working to hire more program assistants, so our existing program assistants and teachers and substitutes who are filling in the gaps, they're really stretched. They're stretched to provide services for students and appropriate supervision. We're doing it, but we're stretched, and I'm just being open with you to let you know that. Mr. Wildman will be talking about buses, but we know that this has been a stressor on our families and on our students who have had long rides. They've had to undergo, some of them, the stress of arriving to school late or getting home late, and we cannot dismiss that, because it's incredibly important. It's also been a stressor for our administrators and our offices that have had to work so hard on communication with our families. And our teaching staff, as mentioned before, is balancing both the teaching that they want to do and what they know they need to do, which is helping students get reacquainted with school. So that's the flavor of the start of the school year this year. I also want to share that shield testing began this week. We had 4 schools go through the first round of shield testing on Monday and Tuesday. I had the opportunity to witness some of our youngest learners over at Meadowview going through the process, and it was like clockwork, and the kids did a great job, and it was quick and easy. I'm looking forward to going over to Woodview tomorrow to test myself, and I'm just going to share openly, I'm planning to go through it weekly, because I'm looking forward to having that weekly assurance that I'm free of COVID. So I'm really hoping that we'll have a lot of people, a lot of adults in our system do that as well. And I'm going to hand this over to Mr. Wildman to talk about busing.
Thank you. School bus companies across the nation are experiencing chronic driver shortages. Durham Transportation, the company we use, has not been spared. These shortages have had an impact on the transportation services we provide to our students. In response to the labor shortage, we have worked with Durham to adjust and consolidate bus routes and bus stops to be able to provide the most reliable transportation services to as many of our students as possible. Some routes have arrived later than scheduled in the first few weeks of school. We do understand the great inconvenience these circumstances have caused for our families. We apologize, and we are working closely every day with Durham to provide transportation as efficiently as possible. Communication is one area we are proud to report has improved between ourselves and Durham and the community. Late routes are communicated in real time to parents to enable them to make the best decisions for their children. I do have a daily call with Durham. It's not just a daily call. I call them 3, 4, 5, 6 times a day on multiple issues as they arise. In the moment challenges and to get feedback on how things are improving. Durham has raised their game. However, I'd love to tell you that these problems are 100% behind us. They're not. We are working with them every day. Durham has drivers in the pipeline to start as soon as possible, and we're working together to minimize the impact on our children. We'd like to thank the community again for their patience and understanding as we work through these painful issues.
Thank you, Chris, and I want to thank you as well, Mr. Wildman, for all of your hard work on this very difficult issue, so thank you. And that brings us to the end of the superintendent's report tonight.
Thank you very much. Next is committee reports, Community Engagement Committee.
Do you want to give the report this time?
All right. So last night at the Meadowview Outdoor Classroom, we hosted the community engagement. We had the community cafe, and this was a phenomenal, I think, turnout. I kind of wrote this up because I was just so excited I couldn't kind of contain all the great things. So first I wanted to definitely thank Christy Miller for planning and organizing what a successful community cafe last night. It was invigorating to meet so many like-minded community members. The synergy and excitement that was created while stirring up ideas was really contagious. The structured introductions and discussions that were prepared by Christy created a dialogue that I believe will be a catalyst for so much greater collaborations in the future throughout different bodies in the community. So partnering with the districts and just basically there was a thinking map, and it was just incredibly detailed, the amount of bodies that were able to contribute to this and figure out where connections are in the community and how they're going to kind of help each other thrive. Obviously, there's a lot of information that came out of that. So Christy, Stephen, and myself are eager, I think, to report as more of these connections develop, evolve, and grow. But there were parents, there were members from the village, from CLC, from, almost every, library, everybody was there. There were representatives from all over, and it was really exciting to see just fellow volunteers and things like that, excited and just wanting to kind of have like a brain dump, brainstorm idea map, basically. I don't know. I'm just really excited for that, obviously. But Christy came up with an incredibly structured evening, but also it encouraged so much creative thought. And I think a lot of good is going to come from that. But I'll let you follow up with all your details.
Thank you. I would just add there were 10 projects that were identified that we are not sponsoring in any way. They're just people coming together across the community, but it looks like those 10 projects got some encouragement, some offers for money and time support too. So I think it was a testament to definitely to our community and how they work together. So.
Okay, thank you. Next is I need a motion to approve the consent agenda, including the personnel addendum that was sent to you earlier tonight.
So moved.
Second.
Braden,
Aye.
Nash,
Aye.
LaCroy,
Aye.
Anderson,
Aye.
Miller,
Aye.
Mack,
Aye.
and Weedman.
Aye. All right, next we'll be moving on to the action items. The first action item is I need a motion to approve the resolution for hazardous conditions eligible for transportation.
So moved.
Second.
So this resolution is an annual thing we do every year for the bus routes, for the hazardous, so that we get reimbursement for transportation and everything that goes along with it. So anybody have any questions?
I just have a really general question. Is there a trend that we've noticed? Are there more or fewer, or are they staying the same, just generally?
There's no change from last year as presented. There's 19 routes as per the resolution.
Okay, and then I'm going to back up and just tell you, and before I forget, that I had a nice conversation with someone at a bus stop across the street, or on my street, who was saying that the service had improved quite a bit, and she was really pleased, so just an FYI.
Woohoo.
Go ahead.
Weedman,
Aye?
Miller,
Aye.
Mack,
Aye.
Nash,
Aye.
Braden,
Aye.
LaCroy,
Aye.
Anderson.
Aye.
Okay. Next, I need a motion to approve the termination of employment for Tommy Johnson, a probationary employee of the school district, effective immediately.
So moved.
I'll second. Any discussion, comments, questions? Okay.
LaCroy,
Aye.
Braden,
Aye.
Anderson,
Aye.
Miller,
Aye.
Mack,
Aye.
Weedman,
Aye?
Nash.
Aye.
And next, we're moving on to unfinished business. The first item on under unfinished business is the long-range facilities plan update.
Oh, yeah, that's the right one. Sorry. Yes. Members of the Board of Education, myself and Mr. Halpern will be representing some of the slides that were shared with the Finance Committee on August 11th. The slide deck was produced by our architect of record, Walt, and is their update of the long-range facilities plan. The administration, at the request of the Board of Education, has added one slide to show capital work completed to date. We will walk you through the priority of needs, summary of findings by school, discuss some potential funding options, and finally the timeline moving forward. So here is a recap of the facility assessment process. Walt has reviewed the last assessment information from 2018. They've walked through each of our 7 buildings, highlighted any changes, updated cost estimates, and have created a matrix of their findings. Adam and myself have reviewed the draft information, and we will be meeting with them next week to discuss the final reports to be presented to you on September 22nd. All of this is in alignment with our strategic goals: fiscal sustainability and creating learning environments to support our students. We cannot operate without a long-range facility plan. We have 3 categories which make up a comprehensive long-range facility plan. The first is the building envelope. This is the roofs, the masonry, the windows, the bones of the buildings. The next is the indoor air quality, the mechanical, which we just heard all about, which is the HVAC and the air conditioning. And third is the modernization of learning environments. Category 1 will be complete by September 22nd, and Category 2 will be presented to you this evening by our friends from Train, as we just heard. And like 3 layers of a cake, Category 3 will be the top layer, which will take more time and discussion, primarily as our architects engage with teaching and learning, technology, building leadership, and many other stakeholders to build the vision for connected devices, flexible furniture, and other upgrades to support modern learning opportunities. So that is coming soon. Now I'm going to let Adam take over and walk you through the most recent capital spending and the preliminary findings from the reports.
Mr. Wildman, thank you very much. Board of Education, thank you. So we're going to go over some of the spending over the past couple of years, 3 years, which most of you are aware of and have been here for. Actually, I'm pretty sure all but maybe one at this point. But just to give a little overview on it, and then I will go through the sheets that Wold also went through at our last board meeting that was presented to the Finance Committee so that the whole entire board gets to see a little bit of what is proposed and what we are looking at for the long-range plan of over the next 10 years or so. You'll see the top one here with the completion of the solar initiatives over at 4 buildings. We're going to exclude that one because we're looking at the lower fruits on it, I should say, but I don't like to use the word fruits, but the envelopes of it. The roof replacement at GMS, which supported the solar, just shy of $700,000. Our HLS survey for Park Campus, which is our health and life safety, which is required by the state for us to do. At that point there, goes through anything that might need to be taken care of for, once again, the safety of the school. Could be electrical, could be fire hazardous, that are rated out on an ABC scale. And that ABC scale is a 1 year, 2 year, 3 year out, with the option of not necessarily having to do it, but it's a suggestion. The bus lot over here at Frederick was done in the back here, and at the time that they did it, they had to reconfigure the drive going out and made a deal with the city of Grays Lake on the street. And at the same time also, there was some patchwork done at the parking lot, restriping and reconfiguration to allow for more cars in the parking lot at that point. The parking lots over at Prairie View and GMS. GMS had a complete parking lot redone, and Prairie View had the west parking lot done, and some seal coating and crack fill. And this past summer, we had Meadowview roof and Park Campus roof, which we're still waiting on the completion of Park Campus roof due to the lack of material due to COVID that we are still dealing with. And do keep in mind that the Meadowview roof and Park Campus roof, you see the price of $425,000. That is also not included the grant that came through on the maintenance grant, which is a 50-50 grant of $50,000 from the state of Illinois that we will receive. Hello. So as we move on here, we start off at Avon School. Now do keep in mind, this is work that we are looking, excuse me, in the future that needs to get done for longevity of the school, and also a lot of this is past its useful life. And when I say that, I'm referring to the boiler system that's in the original part of the building. That boiler that is down there, the whole entire system is from 1957, I believe is when it's from. The district has definitely got its useful life out of that one. We keep it running. We can heat the school, but we try to not have to do all the repairs on it. Obviously, the replacement of the roof, right now as it stands, Wold has it at 2022 to have that roof done. They're looking at a 20 to a 25-year life expectancy on a roof. Might we be able to extend it out a little bit? You know, it all depends on where it stands. They have on there the toilets for the ADA compliance, excuse me, the American Disability Act. A lot of the washrooms in that school are smaller, as is everything else over there. It's an older school, and it might be off just by a couple inches. There's some remodeling that definitely would have to be done to make it compliant to the ADA Act. You see on their parking lot maintenance, the parking lot there really is not in bad condition. What it needs is seal coating. Just your yearly to bi-yearly, and you'll see that throughout the slides here on parking lot maintenance. And one of my big plans on it is to, this year I did part of the parking lot over at Prairie View, because the other half really needs to get more asphalt done there before we do it. But I'd like to get them on a rotation, so we're not doing them all at once. Maybe every 2-3 years, we take care of this school and then to this school, so we can keep them on that rotation. It'll save the life of our parking lot. So you will see that throughout many slides. Going down, you see masonry. It's a broad range there, and you're going to see that on a lot of them too. As our buildings are aging, obviously Park Campus is our newest at 13, 14 years old. But then we have our other 3 schools that are at a 20-year age on them to 22 years. So with the masonry, we're talking about cracks in foundations from settling, tuck pointing that needs to be done around the schools. As Mr. Wildman stated before, this has part of that envelope, the building envelope, and the big key to it is to keep water infiltration out. We can keep water out by taking care of our roofs and our tuck pointing, all of our masonry. Then we get into flooring. The flooring throughout the school, we have in most of our schools carpet. An average life expectancy of carpeting in a school is a 10-year life. This school here that we're in right now is 20 years. So over time, it takes a beating with all the kids running through it, starts wearing down. Also, our VCT flooring in it starts cracking, harder to wax. Do keep in mind, I wanted to go back real fast, you'll see at the bottom the total cost range. That is over a life expectancy of, an expectancy of a 10-year plan. And that $4 to $5 million includes everything that Wold will be presenting when we do the full long-range plan. Frederick, as I stated, it's more just, you'll see it throughout. I will not go over everything that we have already, but you'll see on here on windows, that's the sealant around the windows. From sun hitting the windows, that sealant starts to shrink up and crack, and it allows for bugs to get in. It allows for moisture to be able to get in and get through the windows and into the mortar. Once again, flooring. But then you look at the bottom, and it says concrete. Anybody who's gone through our district will see we have a lot of concrete in this district. In front of our schools, there's a lot. Over the years, through the winter, it takes a toll. That snow, the ice, salt, rain, kids, plows. And so for safety factors, obviously, we need to replace that concrete. You might notice if you came in through the front that there was five pads out here that were replaced over the summer. Those were some of the worst tripping pads out here. Because of the cost of it, we took care of what we had to take care of right now, and we will continue to move on with that. Over at Avon this summer, I had the concrete raised in spots because there were trip hazards. Just general maintenance that we need to do to keep our buildings running safely. The middle school, replacing the roof. The replacing of the roof is 15 to 20 years down the road. And truthfully, it's probably longer than that because of the solar on the roof. That solar acts as a shield. So the rays do not get through to actually delaminate the roof and cause as much issues as a roof that's taking the sun on fully. But they do have between 15 to 20 years. We might even see 25 to 30 at this point. Locker rooms. The locker rooms in the school, are they 100% necessity? Not necessarily, but they are older. And as I've gone through them, I've noticed the lockers are damaged. And when I say damaged, it's like the tops of them are smashed in. Over the years of usage throughout our locker rooms, kids coming in from other schools, just our kids, you get to that time where things need to be replaced in them. Once again, you'll see the masonry tuck pointing, window replacement, science labs refresh. The tables in there, they've got a lot of cracks and delamination over the tops of them. And obviously, as times have changed, things have changed with science and the way teaching happens. And they do. They need a big upgrade within them. Along with, and it's not on here, but a lot of the classrooms come that way, and the doors in the school, from the hardware to the doors to just all, a nice upgrade within inside the school. Park campus, you'll see there's not as much. We would hope not in a 13-year period of time. You do see a higher number there, and that higher number is because we have more concrete there, we have more parking lot there, and a lot more roof. That roof over there, we should get at least another 10 years out of it, at least. We keep our fingers crossed. That roof is different than the rest of the roofs in our district. That roof there is a rubberized TPO roof. And also on top of that roof has all of the solar. Prairie View, as I stated earlier, the east side of the parking lot definitely needs to be repaved. So down the line here, that is going to be one of the projects that we'll have to look into. And as stated, the roof over there, 22 to 23 years old, it comes to that time of the useful life on it. We've already had to do a couple of repairs on it over this past summer, where the roof has actually sagged and we had water coming through. We had to call the roofing company out. We had to rebrace the roof in there and do some shingles. The concrete out in front of there, I actually had to do some patches, and that's another one where it will definitely need more as the years continue on. Woodview, only half of that roof was done. The other half of that roof is still a old ballasted roof, and over the time will definitely need to get done. We've had a couple leaks in it, nothing too bad that I can say over my year, but just once again, it's part of that maintenance end of it and the useful life on it. And obviously, Woodview is definitely an older school that definitely has older hardware within it, floors, and doors throughout. Meadowview does not have as much, but it definitely will need some tuck pointing throughout masonry, outside concrete up front. That school obviously too has a lot of traffic flow with the park district coming through. Not very much on the ADA stuff, but there are some washrooms that definitely have some ADA issues. And the window replacement, I'm going to be honest, I think that was more of a typo, and that is, as I look through reports on it, that's the sealant around all the windows, as stated in the others. That's just a little brief overview of what we've gone over and what Wold went over at the last board meeting for those who haven't seen it, and try to give a little bit more of an explanation. Obviously, once the long-range plan comes out and we are done assessing it all, everybody will get their chance to view it. Mr. Wildman? Thank you.
Thank you, Adam, for adding some color and commentary to the report that was given to the Finance Committee. So we have a preliminary budget range for work identified. Obviously, there's some revision that we've talked about in us kind of walking through the presentation of 26 to 34 million. It does include escalation, so we have a second range of 30 to 41 million. Escalation is a number that architects and construction managers add to account for price increases if you don't get the work done today. So that is a future work saying, hey, guess what? we're assuming that there will be escalation and an unusual inflationary factor of about 3 to 5%, depending on the specific project. So we've had Train's estimate for prioritized indoor air quality improvements over 10 years. So if we were to just very crudely add those numbers together, the district should be spending $3 million per year on its capital. How do we pay for this? Well, funding options is an agenda item for the next Finance Committee on November 18th. We've invited Elizabeth Hennessy from Raymond James to discuss these in detail, and she will give us some strategies. This is the slide that was presented by the architect, and I just want to briefly go through some of these. She will talk about them in detail. Debt service extension base. Our current DSAB is $505,590. That means that we could make an annual payment of principal and interest, not to exceed that amount, for any debt that we'd issue. This does not require a referendum. Debt service extension base increases by CPI, so it increases every year. To date, the district has never used its DSAB since it was established in 1994. There are two types of working cash bonds. I'm going to talk about those next. Taxable working cash bonds, which are used for ongoing operations. Then there are tax-exempt working cash bonds, which are potentially used for capital improvements. That would be the bonds that we would be thinking to issue, tax-exempt working cash bonds. Then there are life safety bonds, which are also used to make capital improvements, but these are mandated by law. These are usually to do with your 10-year health life safety plan. Both working cash bonds and life safety bonds can be issued through a DSAB. We also have alternate revenue bonds. These are bonds when the principal and interest is paid from your operating budget. CCSD does not have the ability to issue alternate revenue bonds in our current fiscal situation. So I want to be very serious about that. And finally, referendum bonds, primarily used to build new schools or increase your operating levy. These do require a referendum vote. So here's the condensed timeline. We did update it from the original slide deck. The presentation of Walden and Train's final reports on September 22nd. Both groups will be there to represent to you. Funding and financing options, as I just discussed, on November 18th. And finally, Walden Architect will need design time to be able to prioritize work for the following summer. And that I have as March and April. I know there's a lot of information we've hit you with, but do I have any questions from the Board of Education this evening?
I have a question. Excuse me. This really goes to Mr. Halpern's section of the presentation in terms of the various schools and the list. And I know you said that it was intentionally exhaustive, but coming out of these reports, will we have like a prioritized list? Right, so there's those things that, to your point, it's like, all right, maybe low-hanging fruit, but there's some other things that maybe we can consider pushing out a little bit.
So yes, actually, on the list, it gives us, we can pick and choose anything we want at the end of the day. But it gives you a prioritizing list, and it gives you the years that we should really be looking into doing them. So that way, we're not going and spending all this money at one time. We can extend it out over this period of time, rather than throwing it out at once.
Okay.
But at that point there, that's where it comes down to knowing exactly what needs to be done at that time to keep your buildings intact and keep them running smoothly.
Sure.
And looking forward to the future and going, okay, so we're going to do here to the next step. And keep in mind that long-range plan, truthfully, you could take a lot of it and just keep rolling it over through the years. It's that roadmap that you can keep using throughout to constantly look over.
Sure, thank you. And then my next question is just around having some type of standing report, and Dr. Glickman, Mr. Weedman, keep me honest in terms of my expectation, but to Mr. Halpern's point, you know, we want to get into a situation where we kind of have this rolling effect where we're not trying to come at all the schools at once, and we have a enormous list, no shortage of things that need to be done right. So I think, at least for me personally, it would be helpful to have a standing report, and I don't know if that is monthly or bi-monthly, quarterly, or what, you know, pick a cadence. But to me, this was like a lot, to your point, right? This is a lot of stuff, and it's just like, how does the board stay in front of, and not so much the bigger projects, but some things that seem like they are kind of consistent and will happen with the regular cadence, you know, the need for a sidewalk, fixing parking lot maintenance, driveways, concrete, window sealants, brick pointing. Like, to me, those kind of almost seem like run the business type activities, right? And so how do we, one, create a schedule, and then two, make sure that it's in front of us so that we can be on top of what's happening versus what's not, because this kind of feels like enormous, and who hasn't been keeping their eye on the buildings that like it's all this right now?
So I absolutely agree with you. To have a schedule is absolutely the way to go. But I do want to note that I'm not going to say that it was somebody not keeping an eye on the buildings. Do keep in mind that in a 3-4 year period of time, we built 3 buildings to be able to bring in all the kids, because the growth was incredible. So at that period of time, we built all these buildings, and did somebody think out the future and go, okay, we have to have X amount of dollars, because truthfully, everything's going to happen at one time when you do that. It was not necessarily the case, possibly, or it was, but different things can happen throughout. So I don't believe that was the
Sure,
case.
and not a blame, but more
Nope.
so a point of order and opportunity to just make sure that we keep that top of mind.
But absolutely, 100%, that is our plan, is to keep this going yearly and have a complete list of it. Mr. Wildman and myself, we do meet weekly on it to see where we're at and how we're doing, and what everybody's, you know, how far are we coming on everything.
Sure.
Thank you. And I'm sorry, I just wanted to interject that I know you and Chris were intentional about including a slide that showed some of the work that's been done over the past few years. So right now, I'm sure it feels like a lot of sticker shock, for sure, but work has been ongoing every single year, and we'll keep doing that for sure.
Thank you.
So if I hear you correctly, and I don't have an issue with it, is it something that the board would want once the prioritized list gets put out and we kind of get into a schedule of maybe, you know, every 4 months or, you know, 3 times during the school year, and not so much over the summer, because we'll have a summer list
Right.
anyway?
There's a way, I'm just spitballing here, I don't know if this is an opportunity or not, but if we somehow could reduce the amount of petroleum we use, or reduce the amount of gas we use by planting native plants instead of grass, that kind of thing, is there just a way we could get a handle on what our carbon footprint is?
So why don't we'll talk about what kinds of.
Sure.
How we can quantify this information, and we'll see what we can provide. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Envelope in the indoor air quality and then the modernization of learning, right?
Yes, I
So
do.
by February, are we just three?
I think layers 1 and 2 of the cake are gonna get kind of mushed.
Okay,
And
they're
then
separate right now, but
It's
they're
like a
gonna
tres leche, I guess.
Uh-huh.
And then you've got like the top layer, which is gonna be the future discussion that we're gonna have about modern learning.
Okay.
I just want to stress that it's really important that we address, on a Maslow kind of thought, that we address those areas first before we start
Yeah.
to think about the other.
Yeah.
Because we can't have modern learning environments without having safe buildings.
Got it.
We have
Yeah.
safe buildings, but we have to look after the roof before we start thinking about
Right.
those
You don't want
additional.
the terrain on all the modern learning.
Correct. We want to
So in other words, the February look will be at those first two layers.
and then really the things that we can accomplish in the summer. A big part of this is going to be what we can actually do. It's going to be the funding versus the actual ability to get the work done in the time we have available when the kids are not in the buildings. That's also a big constraint that we have to think about.
Yeah.
Hope that answers the
Great.
question.
It did.
Thank you.
Now I want cake, by the way. Now that you mentioned cake, I want cake. All right, so next on the unfinished business is the Esther spending plan, and I see a whole bunch of people getting up to go and give us a presentation. So I assume that's going to be Dr. Glickman and Dr. Lewis.
We have dueling. Oh, my goodness, I don't know how to manage. Hold on. All right, good evening. One moment. Okay, we will begin with our mission, empowering learners, creating equity, and cultivating community. Always want to keep this in the forefront of our mind. And this one doesn't, there we go. Okay. And I want to also bring forward two of our strategic plan goals and board policy that this presentation speaks to. So first of all, we have a teaching goal, review and update teaching, learning, and assessment practices and materials through an equity lens to create culturally responsive learning environments. And the finance goal, review, expand, and clarify financial practices to increase transparency and communication, with a focus on aligning financial decision-making to district goals. Both of these topics are in one way or another addressed through our ESSER spending plan. And then there's Board Policy 420, which is maintaining an operating fund balance of 30%, at least 30%. And I want to speak for a little bit about the philosophy we've been using thus far as we have created our ESSER spending plan. First of all, we recognize that funds need to be used for intended purposes. And as Mr. Lewis will be talking about in a little while, there are some very specific requirements that we have for the funds. There are also areas of flexibility, but we want you to be aware of those. We want to make sure that we have funds available for current unknowns. So I want to walk through these. First of all, there's the concept of unfinished learning. We've been very intentional in our school district not to make assumptions about our students. There's a lot of rhetoric in the world about what happened for our children over the past 18 months and what it means for them. We decided that we wanted to very carefully of unfinished learning. Similarly, there are students' social emotional needs. We don't want to make assumptions about what those social emotional needs are. Resources to address those needs. There are potential technology needs, including projectors. This is something that we've been talking about quite recently, that we have very old projectors in our classrooms, and it will be soon, very soon, as in some cases right now, time for a refresh in some of those classrooms so that we can provide the instruction that we want to for our students. And then there are mitigation strategies and other COVID-related needs. So I want to pause here because, again, we're talking about making sure we have funds available for current unknowns. This is a perfect, I have a perfect example to share with you. So as we built our plans for this school year, we recognized that there was really no way to know how frequently we would be quarantining students and how many students we would be quarantining. Well, here we are. What are we, 8 days into the school year, I believe it is? And we are more than that. But anyway, we're recognizing that it's happening frequently. And as you heard me talk about earlier, our office staff, our principals, Mrs. Lorenzo, in our offices, there's no possible way for us to leave that burden completely, but we're recognizing that there may be some things we can do. So we're talking about doing something like hiring some part-time contact tracers. This is a conversation we're in the midst of. We need funds available to do something like that. So that's an example of some of the unknowns that we knew we needed to have. Meet the needs of the district, and I'm going to hand this off to Mr. Lewis to talk about that.
So as Dr. Glickman just finished talking about blending and braiding, those are terms that the state have really been endorsing and encouraging us to consider. So I want to just talk about what those two words mean. And so they are interchangeable at times, but I want to make sure that we're aware of what they're talking about. In the past, the state has been very, very specific about state funds, and now with all of the to fulfill. And so the first one is about braiding, and it's bringing the financial assistance of several sources together. That makes a whole lot of sense to us, that we're all shooting for the same end, and we're trying to pull money to support that. But we're also continuing to keep the award-specific identity. So we still have to follow the rules of the grant or that funding source to be able to make that happen. The other one, though, is blending, and blending is that same concept of original award-specific identity. And this is pretty significant for the board, for the state to say. And I'm seeing Dr. Diaz nod her head with me about those things. In the past, very specifically, the state specifically about some of our grants have said you can only use the money for this and only for that. Well, some of the grants are still maintaining that, but they also have said, well, let's think a little bit bigger about the use of some of those funds. The best example that I can give you, or one of the many examples that we're using blending and braiding, typical lunchroom would have looked like a number of years ago, but this is what the lunch. Well, those used to be all lunch tables, and now they're individual seats. We didn't have that many seats available to us across the district. We didn't have them in storage. We didn't have them available. So we've needed to buy some new desks to make this happen. Well, the new desks are actually going into the classroom, and the old classroom ones are coming into a space like this. And so I'm talking about blending and braiding, though. And so some of the money is going to come from one of our funding sources of an Esther grant, but then also we were able to use some title funds. And so we were able to use some title funds for our 2 title schools, for Avon and Prairie View, to also support the initiative for desks in their school. So we specifically identified how many new desks we were buying out of Prairie View and Avon, and we're able to pull the money out of that fund out of title, with additional funds coming from the ESSER grant for across the district. I hope that makes sense about how we're really managing to pay some money out of here and a little bit of money out of here to get our overall goal of what we needed to do at that time. So is about all of the funding that we're getting, and then I'm going to talk specifically about ESSER 2. So the first line here is about ESSER 2. The district was granted $953,000 plus a little bit more. Then we were told, after we had started working on ESSER 2, that we were also getting a grant called ESSER ARP. We're going to go about what all those acronyms mean in a little bit. That was $3,166,000 and a little bit more. Wow, this is pretty amazing. Then we found out unexpectedly on one day that we were getting another $1 million from something called the additional set-aside. And so what that was, when the state of Illinois got their ESSER fund, because of our funding sources, that we were identified as a district to get some of that set-aside money. Those set-aside specific money, that $1 million, have some very specific purposes. And so we're going to hear about those as well. But wow, it also has a lot of work to make it happen, that all of that is going to come through. So again, I told you I was going to speak specifically about ESSER 2. So ESSER 2 is a grant that we got. We have already submitted the initial grant. And one of the interesting things about the grants is for us to be able to access any of the money, we have to submit, they have a certain term, and I was practicing earlier, I forgot. Substantially approvable grant. And so we have to submit a grant, and we put in as many of the details that we can, but we have to allocate all of the money. It is very common in state and federal grants that we have a number of amendments that we do. So when we have more exact amounts, we make an amendment and change those. And so thankfully, we have a process to amend the grants first and be able to get it. So we've had the big grant, the first application was submitted. We also have to do quarterly expenditure reports, so anything that we spend, we have to document and say how we've spent it. And then we also have been just in the process of submitting the ESSER 2 First Amendment, because we realized some of the things that we put in, we needed to change some of the dollar amounts. So the ESSER 2 is part of the Coronavirus Response and Relief Supplemental Appropriations, the CRRSA Act. There's not going to be a quiz later. But it was enacted on December 27th of 2020. The interesting things about both the ESSER 2 and the ESSER ARP that my colleague will be talking about is that we can go all the way back to March 13th. So we can go back to March until September 30th of 2023. So we have a pretty big window of going back through those past school year up until future school years to spend the money. One of the important things is that the Esther 2 funds, as Dr. Glickman said, some of the grants have specific purposes. So this one specifically is about addressing learning loss, preparing schools for reopening, and testing, repairing, and upgrading to improve air quality in school buildings. So interestingly, this one had a major focus on air quality in the buildings to open the buildings in a safe environment. I'm hoping that makes sense. The things that you've already heard. The last column is when we've discussed these things already with the school board. So we wanted you to know when and if we've already had those conversations. So one of the big ones was we knew that we added 3.6 teachers. And we did that because of mitigation issues. If some of our buildings had classrooms and their class size was too large for the capacity of the room, we needed to add a new teacher to make sure that they fit appropriately with social distancing in the classroom. This is an example of the amendment. When we first put it in, we put in for 3 teachers because that was a board, we discussed that on June 9th that we needed to add 3 more teachers because of mitigation. Well, we also realized after Mr. Wolk did his work about it, whenever we add a classroom teacher, we also are adding a portion of an art teacher, a portion of a music teacher, a portion of an art teacher, because that class has to have that support with all the other teachers as well. So when we wrote the amendment, we actually amended it to say 3.6 teachers, and then we put the actual salaries because by then we know how much those teachers will be making. But one of the things we talked about was the mentor coordinator. This year we have a very large group of new teachers, and we had a state opportunity through Mr. Wolk's work to be participating in a state-sponsored, state encouraged mentoring program for our new teachers. I'm thrilled that we're on the road to having a really amazing program for our new teachers. They deserve it. They need it. It's important to maintain them here in the district to support their instructional needs. So we have a part-time mentor coordinator. You've heard me give a couple different reports about summer school. We had a very, very robust summer school program this past year. We needed new supplies. We needed to pay for teachers. We needed to pay for transportation. We had a number of things that were suggested as part of the intent of the ESSER 2 money. So summer school, we have spent out $104,000. There will be a summer school report coming, so you know all the last details about that. But that was how much we spent for this past summer school. You'll hear in another grant in ESSER 3 how we're preparing for next year's summer school as well, as it's one of the set-asides, hint, hint, of that extra money that we were given on that one fabulous day. And then school furniture. You just heard me talking about the desks. So that was coming out of this. We needed those to come. And this is an example where we're trying to use money from different sources as well. So we look for Lake County money, we look for state money, we look for ESSER 2 money to help us with PPE. Curriculum supplies for band, choir, and MTSS. MTSS, you heard us talk about in the past. That's a refresh about our support for students. MTSS stands for Multi-Tiered System of Support, formerly known as RTI. You've probably heard that word before. But it's some resources and some supplies that we need to get that going. And that's part of our 30-minute intervention period every day that we also talked about at the board. So what I hope you're hearing is these are things that we have been letting the board know about or asking permission for, all those kind of things. We do have one that's a potential. And you see there's a future date up there, September 22nd. My colleague, Mr. Vipond, is going to be coming with a request about some outside connectivity to support outdoor learning. And so to make sure that we can use our technology outside of our walls, so the envelopes of our school, that was a new word for me in his report. I asked him the other day, what does envelope mean? So, purposes out of that request that's coming. It's still future and potential because we haven't gotten your involvement into all of that as well. Whew. That's about ESSER 2.
Thank you. All right, on March 11th, the American Rescue Plan, the ARP Act, was signed into law. It is a $1.9 trillion package of assistance measures, including $122 billion for the ARP Elementary and Secondary School Emergency Relief Fund. Funds are provided to state educational agencies and school districts to help safely reopen and sustain the safe operation of schools and address the impact of the coronavirus on the nation's students. So as we've already discussed, ESSER ARP funds, just like the ESSER 2 funds, may be dated back to March 13, 2020, the date the national emergency was declared. One difference is we do have an extra year for ESSER ARP funds to be expended through September 2024 in comparison with the ESSER 2 funds. All right, the district must expend a minimum 20% of its total allocation to address learning loss through the implementation and also in terms of their interpretation by ISB. Extended day, comprehensive after-school programs, or extended school year programs to ensure that interventions respond to students' academic, social, and emotional needs. The 20% of the original allocation is $428,283. So everyone write that number down, because you're going to need it in a second. In addition to the minimum 20% we just discussed, we must spend additional amounts of the state set-aside allocation. That's the $1,025,275. That was the day that we got our extra $1 million on learning loss, summer enrichment, and after-school program. There are specific breakdowns of that $1 million. I'm not have to go through them, but if you add the total amount of the learning loss, it's $1,160,623. So here is our current spending plan for ARP ESSER. Again, we like to use colors. The green expenditures of what we've communicated to the board already, such as the partial cost of the train indoor air quality reports, not covered in the ESSER 2 application. Learning loss subscriptions, such as Amplify, Newsella, and Edulastic. The yellow expenditures, these are the explicit amounts from the set-aside that we've identified, such as the summer school expenditures for 2021, not covered in the ESSER 2 and for next year, as well as the new requirement for the after-school programs of $147,000. The 1.1 is for the ELA curriculum resources K through 8. That will be a recommendation that the teaching and learning team bring to the Board of Education early next year, following an inclusive process of input with stakeholders. And the orange expenditures. These are the unassigned or current contingency of the funds. We've had some internal discussions from the administration about the use of the $400,000. We've just mentioned it. and we have an additional unassigned of $427,693. The 427 represents 13% of the current grant as a contingency.
Thank you. So you can see my colleagues have talked appropriate expenditures and funding opportunities to meet those needs. We bring our recommendations to you, the Board of Education, and you have the opportunity to discuss those expenditures, and thus far you have approved all of those expenditures. And the question that we pose to you tonight is, does that process meet your expectations, and do you believe that it meets the needs of the school district? Obviously, we wouldn't be presenting you with any recommendations that we don't think meet the needs, but we want to hear from you whether you think this process is meeting your expectations. And so really that brings me, okay, this is not going to work for me. Any questions that you would have or discussion about that question? And that is the end of our presentation.
Thank you so much for giving us a comprehensive look at where things are going. I think the process makes sense in almost all areas, but if it is helpful to everyone else, it would really help me to see this on the front end, because at this point we're looking at requests one at a time, but we don't know how they fit together. And so and I don't know if that's feasible or not. And the point of me asking, and I want to be really clear about this, is not that I think any of these I would vote differently or that any of them are a waste of money by any means. It seems like they are all very useful. But as I'm reading and I think it would be easier to go to our community partners and say, what are you doing with any funding or any expenditures, and how can we create a community narrative that we can explain to other residents as we're moving forward, especially if we're moving into a time when we are looking at some pretty significant structural needs in terms of maintenance.
Thoughts? If you want, maybe you and I can get together and discuss exactly what you're looking for. We can bring it to the administration and see what is feasible out of that, so that we can get you the information that you're looking for. So maybe you and I can kind of bounce ideas back and forth exactly what you're looking for.
Yeah, I'm happy to meet with you, and I'm also as opposed to, nothing has ever been brought to us that isn't worthwhile or valuable, but it loses meaning when it's separate from the whole plan itself.
So for example, Christy, I was thinking about like when Mr. Vipon comes next month with his request, then that might look like basically the chart. It's already on there, but, let's say that we're new, be like, hey, we're looking at adding this expenditure, here's what's been spent to date, here's a new item, here's how it addresses, ESSER goals, here's how it falls within how we can spend the money, and then here's what it does to kind of our running balance of that, that particular grant. Is that what you're looking for?
Along those lines, and also, are we looking to meet the daily operations? Are we looking 5 years down the road, 10 years down the road, 70 years down the road, so that we can say, okay, if we are going to invest in an indoor air quality striving for with the use of this extra funding, and how resilient are we? We can start having those conversations with Melinda Bush or Sam Yingling or, again, the other boards, so that's a more cohesive, more coordinated effort. So I don't know if that, I think it's worth a discussion and something that would help all of us, not just me.
Yeah, so I like where you're going with it from a broader standpoint. I think just to kick the tires, I'm more aligned with what Christy Braden is thinking, and then perhaps what we can do is start to then tease out components of that, because now we're having that bigger pie view, and we can start to tease out those components. So if community engagement then wants to engage with other stakeholders over the Chamber of Commerce or what have you, right, now we have a starting point. I think Christy, the way she articulated it made me feel like, yeah, I can totally rally around that, and it makes sense, and I think you can leverage what comes out of that for a broader purpose.
And I have to be really honest, Christy, I can catch about every third word that you're saying, so I probably made
Sorry, yeah.
I'm sure if we put our heads together, we would have some graphic that would be helpful.
Yeah, I mean, to me, it looks a lot like what's been presented. Like, it's a great starting point. Like, we have now, like, starting today, we have current state, and then as we make future decisions, and I think what I'm reading here is that 49,000 Mr. Vipon's going to request really does close out our ESSER 2 funding. Is that correct? Because those numbers match now.
That's correct, although he's already told me he thinks he may be able to bring that number down. But that's correct. And I do want to comment that we can very easily now begin, when we bring you something that we are wanting to spend out of ESSER funds, we can bring it to you in context of what we've already shared with you.
Right.
That'll be easy to do. You know, an interesting challenge that we've had really over the past 18 months, and it's a positive challenge, I want to be clear, is that we kept getting money when we didn't know we were getting money, right? So a lot of, you know, Mr. Lewis didn't talk with you about this, but I will share with you that he has done an amazing job working with our business office, certainly working with Mr. Wildman, to be swapping things out from different funds, from different ESSER requirements. So there were things that were in ESSER 2, for example, at one point, which once we got ESSER ARP, realized, oh, we have different flexibilities in one grant than the other, and he would swap them. So things were ever evolving, which is why you really didn't get this kind of a picture from us prior to now. But now that things are a little more locked down in terms of what's available to us, unless, of course, something changes, we can very easily continue to provide this kind of information to you on a very regular basis when we're asking, when we're making a recommendation to spend more money out of those funds.
And I guess to maybe build in Christy Miller's request, I'm wondering if there's kind of a nod to, so for example, you know, if we're going to buy some subscriptions, like letting the library know what we're buying, or, you know what I mean, some sort of, what are the obvious maybe communications that we could do outside, you know, within the community to keep those lines of communication open. Now, and maybe that's part of what the engagement committee, you know, there's an input into, okay, those conversations are happening, and now we know sort of investments that the district is making, and let's just share what those investments are across the community. I think that's, you know, to me, this would be a great input for those conversations as well.
Yeah, I think it would be a great community conversation to talk about Build It Back Better. It was actually based on the phases of reconstruction after a disaster. What can we do to make sure that we're building up so they're more resilient after this money is spent? So it would be a great community conversation to say, are we in fact more resilient, and where and how, and do we want to continue those? Those are the types of conversations that actually came up at the meeting last night too.
I also wanted to address for a moment another question that you asked, Christy. I won't be able to quote you perfectly, but you said something about, are we looking to do what's urgent right now, or are we looking for the future, right? And I think the answer is yes. Some of these expenditures are for right now because we have mitigations that we have to deal with right now. So those 3.6 teachers, that's a right now issue. If we end up hiring some contact tracers, we all hope that eventually we would have no need for contact tracers, right? That's not something that we want to have long term, but we may need it right now. The money that Mr. Lewis talked about, or I think actually Mr. Wildman talked about, related to our
Are we going to use space? How are we going to use resources? What are we going to do in those situations that are predicted with pretty high likelihood? So that's where my head is also going in addition to that. And it's just a conversation I think would be fascinating and really worthwhile.
So I'm going to restate what I said before about me and Christy sitting down and talking. I think it should be Christy and Christy sitting down and talking to figure out what you want, so that you guys get together and you get the report that you're looking for. Does that work?
To be clear, I think what Dr. Glickman said is true in that we're 90% of the way there, because now we have this format that's going to be helpful in putting any new requests into context. So, I don't think we're that far off, personally.
Yeah, I don't think we're that far off either, and it's so nice to have it. So thank you so much for putting it together. Appreciate it.
Anybody else have any questions?
Yeah, I just wanted to tie off and circle back to Dr. Glickman's question around, does the current process meet the need of the board and the school district? I believe it does. The only thing under the current process that would even be a point of consideration, and nothing that I'm necessarily sold on one way or the other, but leveraging the newly formed finance committee. So perhaps, where the administrative team is bringing a recommendation to the board, perhaps there's a step where the finance committee can get engaged so they can poke around potentially, right, to root out some things to make it even more tighter or crisper before it comes to the board.
I'll simply mention that the Finance Committee is only meeting a few times, and some of these matters we would not want to wait to bring to you simply because they're timely. So as possible, and if it feels like it fits into the agenda, I guess I also want to say that. I know the Finance Committee is really looking at kind of pulled back big picture items and how we move forward into the future. So with your understanding, we'll take that as sometimes it may make sense to pass something through the Finance Committee and have them analyze it, and sometimes it wouldn't.
Sure. Absolutely, totally understand.
Sure.
It just may make for a little bit more of an efficient board meeting. 'Cause
Yep.
some of
I hear you. Anything else?
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Next on our agenda is the Arbor Management. Nope, take that back. Sorry. It's the 2021-2022 Round 1 Maintenance Grant. I assume this would be Mr. Wilder?
All right, the state has made $47 million available for this year for its school maintenance project grant, the SMPG program. This is a dollar-for-dollar state matching grant up to $50,000. To apply for this grant, the administration needs board approval. The recommended project is the replacement of 4 rooftop units, RTUs, at Grayslake Middle School, budgeted for next summer. The cost of the RTUs is approximately $500,000, which would reduce the cost to $450,000.
Okay. Anybody have any questions on that? So I expect to see that in a future meeting, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, that's what I thought. Okay. Okay, next is the Arbor Management Contract Update.
Arbor Management has approached the administration and is requesting an amendment to its current contract. They are suffering from a labor shortage. To reopen our schools, Arbor Management has hired 5 temporary employees through an agency at $22.50 per hour, changed the starting salaries of new employees to $13.50, and increased those already hired to $14 to assist with retention. The current contract, amended in May and approved by the board, has a contractual starting salary of $11 per hour for the period July 1 through December 31st, 2021, and rising to $12 per hour for the period January 1, 2021 through June 30th. The contract amendment, as presented in the memo, costs $45,516.70, which is based on 85% of the proposed staffing model cost increase over the school year. We've given the board 3 options for your consideration, outlined in the memo. Option 1, approve the labor adjustment as proposed by Arbor Management. Option 2, ask Arbor Management to split the labor adjustment in half. Option 3, make no amendment to the contract this year. Do I have any questions from the proposal on the options available?
Anybody?
I'd love to hear a little more about how localized this is and sort of what's driving that. If I'm reading this right, it's not necessarily the prevailing wage rate, but maybe it is, and I'm just misreading it. But like, what makes it very local to Grayslake that's affecting?
So I actually asked that question to the owner of Arbor, and he said that they have a Illinois that don't have this labor issue, but in the suburban Cook County and Collier counties, the degree of the labor shortage here, according to Arbor Management, is chronic. Hence why they have had to already make these measures. This is not a proposal. They've already done these things to reopen our schools. So I hope that answers the question.
It does, thank you.
Is there any other information anybody on the board would like, or do we want to, I'm not quite sure how to proceed. Obviously, we're going to have to vote at a future meeting. Do you want a recommended, a recommendation?
Yeah,
or
I
do you
mean,
wanna-
we'll need to know what to bring to you, so,
Okay.
for sure.
Is it something that, I know we're getting late here, so is it something that maybe we put together, can we put maybe a survey together to give a board options?
Absolutely.
And then we can kind of mold that and kind of share that between the board as far as what everybody is thinking?
Sure, we
That
can. I guess I wonder if, I know it's late, but there might be questions that people have about how we got here and what would happen. And we do have our Arbor Management here with us this evening, so if you wanted to ask any questions that they might be able to respond to, then you can make an informed decision. I'll note that it is unusual, it is not our usual practice to bring you a question and suggest 3 options, right? That's not usually what we do. We usually give you a recommendation. This felt like an unusual situation. Arbor did what they needed to do, and we appreciate that, to get our school staffed and our kids fed. However, that required them to increase the hourly rate for employees, and now they've come to us to area are not being asked to do that, and so we wanted you to really be able to consider what you thought made the most sense. You may very well feel like this is a fair request and you want to approve it, and that's fine, that's great, but we didn't know how you feel about it. We wanted to give you a chance to discuss it.
I have a couple of questions of Arbor. Do you suppose that with the rates you're proposing, that will alleviate the problem that you're attempting to address?
Well, of course, that's our goal. I can say that since we've done that, when the rates were minimum, which is 11, recruiting even through the summer, knowing we have to start preparing for the school year. Usually we have a lot of return employees, but since COVID, we haven't had to have all those employees working, like I mentioned earlier, because we were doing the summer, for the summer program, we were doing the Meals on the Bus program. So although it required a lot of packaging, it didn't require as many employees in each building. Therefore, either they couldn't work because of COVID, children, whatever the case may be, we lost a lot of those employees that we've had for a long time. So that's why it's such a problem this year, is because they simply don't want to return or have moved on or found other jobs that pay more. In this area, just looking around when I'm driving around, because I've worked in the area now for 2 weeks every day. Jennifer and I are here 10 hours a day because we want to make sure that the students get fed. And it is a big district. There's a lot of emotion that goes into that. I think earlier somebody had mentioned about hot food. I just want to clarify, we do serve hot food at every school. We cook all the food at the middle school, and it gets shipped out, satellited out to all the elementary schools. So there's a lot of things going on at one time. We're trying to get orders in and things like that. So our goal is that with the rates being higher where they're at now, we are getting a lot more interest. We have had plenty of interviews, and people are coming every day afterwards, and we talk to them, we interview, we send them for fingerprints, we get them in the works as soon as possible. Some, even at that rate, have said, no, I can go to McDonald's and get paid 15, or, you know, I can go to Amazon and get 15 to 18. That's true. The one thing that we always try and push is that this is a Monday through Friday job. You're not going to work nights or weekends. If you're a parent or a grandparent or something of that nature, or a stay-at-home father, anything like that, these hours are, you know, work well with that kind of a schedule. So that's always what we've been able to bank on when we look for employees, that it's usually parents, grandparents, bus drivers that are looking to fill their time in between morning and afternoon. We just don't have that pool of people right now. And we just simply cannot find employees that will work for $11 an hour. And even in January 12, that's just the minimum wage. So we had to do what we thought was best. I didn't want to have to come to Chris and say, I'm sorry, we cannot provide food services right now because we don't have enough employees. Having 6 employees to return and 7 schools and 2 cooking kitchens, just, you know, we didn't even have a driver to drive the truck. Our former manager that was here, who since resigned, she was with us for 4 years. She put in her notice and she didn't even give us notice, to be honest. She just said, it's too much, I can't do it. She said the work overload, she was working 12 hours a day and still couldn't keep up just because of short staff, and she was filling in an hourly. She's trying to do her job. We're there. We have our administration of, Vice President of Administration doing the cooking every morning right now. I've been here for, you know, filling in because I want to make sure that everybody, it's good to have bodies, but it's not going to do any good if we're not training them properly. And then we're going to have a lot of people in the schools not doing their jobs, not doing what needs to be done. So I'm investing my time because it's important to me as Vice President of Operations to make sure that not only do we have bodies, that they're actually doing what they need to do and they're trained properly. Otherwise, we're going to fail and they're going to quit. They're going to get frustrated. The principals may not be happy with the service, so that is not a win for anybody. So we're really just trying to get quality employees, trying to get community members back in, trying to get parents to come back in. Part of that is also that they don't need to right now, some of them, because there might be more money coming in. This isn't a high-paying job. They might be working to pay for groceries or extra money. So we're hoping at the end of September, things might change a little bit with people that want to come back to work, but we can't guarantee that. And we really need to have the staffing that's required. Typically it's 19. We're getting there. So we had 6 people when we started. Now we're at 10, almost 12, and within 2 weeks. So we're starting to back off, but we do need to get the temporary labor out of there because that is very expensive. But we want to make sure that we have people and we're serving kids and we're not waiting in line. We don't have enough time to eat. So,
Well, starting with an acknowledgement that you guys have, tried to go above and beyond to maintain your service levels, I would recommend that we either adopt the proposal or we don't split it in half because, to date, you've already expended more, right?
yes, to be honest, and I don't want it to ever sound like contract, because it's not all about that. It really is just about making sure that we're kept whole. Sustainable for us, sorry, it's late. We're already, is something we've never ever in history had to do. So it's just, things are drastically changed since COVID. And it's just even the amount of work that's involved right now compared to what it used to be. There's a lot of employees that are quitting because they said it's too much. It's too much physical labor. They're packing the meals. We're packaging all the breakfast. And I've done it myself. My hands were so sore that one day. But packaging them all, getting the breakfast, delivering them to certain areas in the schools. Some schools want them here, some want them there, some want them other places. So it's a lot of pulling carts and dragging and heavy boxes. But we're doing what it takes. But there are some that can't do that physical work or simply say it's just not worth it.
You have proven to be a good partner to us, and I don't think it makes you a bad partner that you're raising your hand and bringing this to us, and especially against the backdrop of a radically overhauled labor market. It's a really tumultuous time for the labor market. So I do have one outstanding question around why it's not happening to our neighbors. Mr. Wildman, got the anecdotal response for that. I don't know, it just seems like that might not be the end of that story to me. But given your track record being a good partner to us, I would probably be supportive of the proposal. And that's just.
Go to 50%, that Arbor actually is taking on a piece of this as well. Arbor has not asked us to reimburse them for the additional costs. They brought to us a proposal, a request for a contract change that would have had us taking on 100% of the change from September moving forward, and actually in discussion, they changed it and moved it to 85%. So I just wanted to point that out to everyone. And thank you very much for that movement.
Thank you. I know we've been talking a lot, Chris. He's been calling me a lot too, so. But we felt that was only fair because even in hiring, I don't think we'll be at our 100% as far as having 19 employees, which is the contracted amount of employees. So to be fair, we don't want to give you a rate because it has to be built into the meal rate. According to ISB, it can't be billed as supplemental, so we had to work that into the meal rate. So you're still going to be below your reimbursement rate. You're still going to get a higher reimbursement than what we're charging. But we didn't feel that it was fair to charge for 100% of staff when we know that's probably not going to happen. But if we get to at least 80 or 85%, we can manage, we can make it work. And again, like I said, the food service director sadly decided to resign, which didn't help. So we're managing it and training.
I don't mean to cut you off, but we have other people that have questions.
Oh, I'm sorry.
So we're just trying to facilitate.
Sorry.
Moving on.
Sorry.
That's what you, okay. Hey, Chris?
I had a question, just in terms of ARP funds to support your space. Is there any relief that Arbor Management has been able to receive by way of ARP funds?
I would have to look into that more. I don't want to speak if I'm not. I would have to talk to our Vice President of Finance about that.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Anybody else have any other comments, questions? No? Okay. Right. Okay.
Thank you very much for your time. Appreciate it.
Okay, next is board policies, as a quick review. We did go over those this morning, feels like this morning.
It was 3.5 hours ago, so yes.
Prior to this meeting, I'm just going to kind of hit the highlights for you so that we don't have to go through them all. Most of these are over a 5-year, or due because of a 5-year review, which is required. The majority of them have a legal reference update. There are 5 policies that have some sort of language differences. 2:10 dealt with the school districts governing and the COVID-19 type of update. 1:30 was adding the and versus using the standard one that was kind of there. So that's one for you to look at. 2:130 explains the use of policies by the school board to direct the superintendent to basically do the job. 2:240 had a new section to include the inclusive pronouns. That was, which we've been kind of working on anyways as our equity committee. And then 8:90 changed wording to item number 5 to reflect the social media aspect of what's going on in the world. So those are the ones that had any type of changes for you really probably to review for the next time if you have any questions. But the rest of them were due because of a 5-year review. And just legal updates, like a majority of them that we seem to get is just legal reference updates. So if you have any questions on those going forward, we can discuss those when we bring them up for adoption. Okay? And then we have topics for future agenda items.
Yes. Well, believe it or not, there were some presentations that you were originally going to see tonight that we took off, that you get to see next time. Otherwise, it would have been a much longer meeting. So the next meeting will start with a final budget hearing, and I believe that means we'll start at 6 o'clock. Is that right, Sue? Right, so we'll do the final budget meeting at 6 o'clock, hearing at 6 o'clock, and then the regular board meeting at 6:30. There will be a summer school report. Mr. Lewis talked about that before. Adam Halpern will come with a summer projects report with some pictures, right, some photos. We will we'll bring you the policies for approval. As you know, Rolls will be coming back with our long-range master facilities plan. That'll be unfinished business. We'll have some new business items. So you already heard that Mr. Vipon will be coming with outdoor connectivity discussion. Also, he's going to come with a website refresh presentation, something that we're working on. And potentially, we'll have an update of our miscellaneous wage rates plan in the event that we decide to add that contact tracer. And then as per the request we had a little while ago, we'll do something to do with the legislative session, right? So preparation for the legislative session that Tamika asked for. I think that's all we've got. Am I missing anything? Seems like enough.
I think I can see the drool from here. Next we do have a short closed session.
We have a closed session. I'll make it short.
We have a short closed session. And no action is expected to come out of the closed session for us to take action on tonight. So after that, we will be adjourning the meeting. And everybody, good night. Oh, sorry, I need a motion to go into closed session, sorry.
So moved.
Second.
I'll second.
We need roll call? Okay.
LaCroy,
Aye.
Nash,
Aye.
Miller,
Aye.
Mack, Anderson,
Aye.
Weedman,
No.
and Braden.
Aye.